today's video, we are going to look at these people who were eaten alive during cage diving, from a marine biologist testing his academic knowledge to a filmmaker seeking the perfect shot on an island. It was August 15, 2014, when the waters surrounding Seal Island, South Africa, claimed another victim to the ocean's most feared predator. Located 8 kilometers southeast of Hout Bay, this rocky outcrop churned with anticipation as dawn broke over the South African coast. The island's jagged cliffs rose 30 meters above the Atlantic, while beneath the surface, the continental shelf dropped into depths exceeding 500 meters. Home to over 60,000 Cape Fur seals, these waters served as a prime hunting ground for apex predators. Olivia Chen, a 34-year-old freelance wildlife photographer from San Francisco, had arrived at this remote location with a single purpose. For 12 years, she had built her reputation capturing dangerous wildlife in their natural habitats, often pushing boundaries that made fellow photographers uncomfortable. Her portfolio included close encounters with Kodiak bears in Alaska and saltwater crocodiles in Australia, but great whites remained her ultimate challenge. Chen had spent 2 years planning this expedition, studying shark behavior patterns and feeding schedules around Seal Island. Peak season brought massive females to these waters, some exceeding 20 feet in length. She had chosen to work alone, believing that smaller groups attracted less attention from the predators. Her diving cage bobbed 30 meters from the island's eastern shore, where the seal colony's morning exodus would soon begin. The great white shark represents the ocean's most efficient predator, having evolved over 400 million years into a perfect killing machine. Adult females can reach lengths of 20 feet and weight exceeding 5,000 pounds. Their triangular, serrated teeth are designed to slice through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. These apex predators possess electroreception capabilities, detecting the electrical fields generated by all living creatures, making escape nearly impossible once targeted. At 7:23 a.m., an 18-foot female great white emerged from the depths, her massive form cutting through the water with terrifying grace. The shark began circling Chen's cage in a methodical pattern, her black eyes fixed on the photographer inside. Chen recognized the aggressive posturing immediately. The arched back, lowered pectoral fins, and tight circling behavior indicated a highly agitated predator. Despite the obvious danger signals and every safety protocol screaming against it, Chen's obsession consumed her rational mind. The morning light filtered perfectly through the water, and the shark's massive size promised the career-defining footage she'd been desperately chasing. Her trembling hand moved toward the cage's emergency latch, a mechanism she'd been trained never to touch, except in life-threatening equipment failures. Just 30 seconds, she told herself, the same lie that had driven her to photograph avalanches and deadly storms. The metal door swung open with a soft click that seemed to echo through the water like a death knell. Chen extended her waterproof camera housing beyond the cage's protective bars, focusing on the approaching predator. The great white detected the movement instantly, her lateral line system registering the subtle water displacement. In a burst of explosive power, the shark accelerated directly toward the opening. The attack occurred with devastating precision. The great white's jaws, capable of exerting 4,000 psi, clamped down on Chen's torso just below her ribcage. The initial impact crushed her sternum and multiple ribs, the bone fragments puncturing both lungs simultaneously. The predator's powerful neck muscles engaged in a violent thrashing motion, designed to tear away large chunks of flesh from prey. Chen's body was pulled completely from the cage as the shark's serrated teeth sawed through muscle tissue and organs. Her wetsuit provided no protection against the razor-sharp dental array, which sliced through the neoprene-like paper. Blood erupted into the surrounding water as major arteries were severed. The shark's teeth had penetrated her liver, stomach, and left kidney, causing massive internal hemorrhaging. Chen's breathing apparatus was torn away during the initial attack, filling her damaged lungs with seawater. The combination of catastrophic blood loss, organ failure, and drowning proved fatal within 90 seconds of the initial bite. The great white released its grip and disappeared into the depths, leaving Chen's lifeless body floating near the surface. The cage operator, monitoring from the support vessel, immediately initiated emergency protocols and contacted maritime rescue services. South African authorities launched a comprehensive investigation into the incident, focusing on safety protocol violations and equipment modifications. The diving company faced intense scrutiny regarding its cage maintenance and emergency procedures. Chen's family released a brief statement acknowledging her passion for wildlife photography, while requesting privacy during their grief. The attack marked the third fatal great white encounter near Seal Island in 18 months, prompting renewed calls for enhanced safety regulations in the cage diving industry. Local authorities temporarily suspended commercial shark diving operations pending the investigation's completion. Chen's fatal encounter wasn't the only time experienced divers underestimated apex predators. In Fiji's Beka Lagoon, Ethan Reynolds discovered that another ocean predator was waiting to test his academic knowledge. It was June 3, 2015, when the crystal-clear waters of Beka Lagoon in Fiji transformed from paradise into a nightmare. Located on the southern coast of Viti Levu, this pristine marine sanctuary stretched across 390 square kilometers of protected coral reefs and deep channels. The lagoon's unique geography, featuring dramatic drop-offs and tidal passages, had created the perfect ecosystem for apex predators to flourish in unprecedented numbers. Ethan Reynolds, a 28-year-old marine biology teacher from Perth, had chosen this remote destination to celebrate his honeymoon with wife Sarah, a certified rescue diver with over 200 logged dives. While Ethan possessed extensive diving experience, he had never attempted cage diving with sharks. His adventurous and curious personality drove him to seek first-hand encounters with the marine life he taught about in his classroom. The couple had specifically requested the most active shark site in the lagoon, despite repeated warnings from local operators about recent aggressive encounters. Ethan's fascination with predator behavior stemmed from his academic work studying shark migration patterns. He viewed this honeymoon dive as an opportunity to gather behavioral observations for his curriculum development. Sarah, equally passionate about marine conservation, supported her husband's research ambitions. The couple had spent months planning this expedition, researching the lagoon's reputation as one of the world's premier bull shark diving locations. Recent heavy rainfall had increased nutrient runoff into the lagoon, attracting larger numbers of prey fish and subsequently drawing more predators to the area. Local dive operators had reported unusual territorial behavior among resident bull sharks, with several incidents of cage contact in the preceding weeks. The water temperature of 82 degrees Fahrenheit created optimal conditions for shark activity. Bull sharks represent one of the ocean's most formidable and unpredictable predators. These apex hunters can reach lengths of 11 feet and weights exceeding 500 pounds, with their stocky, muscular build generating tremendous power through the water. Their unique physiology allows them to survive in both saltwater and freshwater environments, making them one of the few shark species capable of traveling far inland through river systems. Most critically, bull sharks possess the highest testosterone levels of any animal on Earth, fueling their notoriously aggressive temperament. Their bite force measures over 5,900 pounds per square inch, delivered through rows of broad, triangular teeth designed to grip and crush rather than slice. Unlike great whites that typically bite and release, bull sharks employ a death roll technique to disorient prey and tear away chunks of flesh. At 2:30 p.m., Ethan and Sarah descended into the aluminum cage suspended 20 feet below the surface. The rectangular enclosure measured 8 feet by 6 feet, with horizontal bars spaced 10 inches apart to prevent shark entry, while allowing clear viewing. The cage's design had been tested extensively, but recent incidents suggested some predators had learned to exploit structural weaknesses. Within minutes of reaching depth, a massive 10-foot male bull shark emerged from the murky depths. His scarred hide and distinctive blunt snout marked him as a mature, territorial male. The predator approached the cage with calculated precision, his small eyes fixed on the human occupants with predatory interest. Ethan, mesmerized by the shark's proximity and eager to observe its behavior patterns, made a fatal decision. Despite explicit safety warnings, He extended his right hand through the cage bars, attempting to touch the passing predator. The bull shark's response was instantaneous and devastating. The predator's massive jaws clamped down on Ethan's forearm with crushing force. His triangular teeth, each measuring over an inch in length, penetrated through the neoprene wetsuit and deep into the bone. The radius and ulna fractured under immense pressure as serrated edges severed muscle tissue, tendons, and major blood vessels. The bull shark immediately initiated his signature death roll, a feeding behavior designed to disorient prey and strip flesh from bone. Ethan's shoulder joint dislocated with an audible crack as the 400-pound predator twisted his powerful body in violent spirals. Sarah grabbed her husband's free arm, desperately attempting to pull him back into the cage's safety. The aluminum bars began bending under the tremendous torque as the shark thrashed against the enclosure. Ethan's wetsuit filled with crimson as the brachial artery ruptured, sending pressurized streams of blood through the water. The predator's grip tightened with each rotation, his teeth grinding against bone as he worked to separate the limb. For 45 seconds, the bull shark maintained his death grip while performing continuous barrel rolls. The violent motion stripped the flesh from Ethan's forearm in ragged chunks, exposing white bone beneath. His hand, still trapped in the predator's jaws, had turned completely pale as circulation ceased. Bone fragments and tissue floated through the water column as the shark's teeth functioned like a biological saw. The bull shark finally released its grip and disappeared into the depths, leaving behind a cloud of blood and debris. Ethan's right arm hung by mere strands of muscle and tendon below the elbow, the bone completely severed. Emergency ascent procedures began immediately as Sarah applied direct pressure to the catastrophic wound using her weight belt. Surface medical teams worked frantically during the helicopter evacuation to Suva Private Hospital. Surgeons performed emergency amputation below the elbow, removing the mangled remains of Ethan's forearm. Multiple blood transfusions were required to replace the massive volume lost during the 45-second attack. Fijian maritime authorities launched a comprehensive investigation into cage design standards and safety protocols. The incident prompted new regulations requiring reinforced barriers and mandatory safety briefings about maintaining distance from marine predators. Beka Lagoon Shark Dive suspended operations for 6 weeks, pending safety upgrades. Ethan's recovery required 18 months of reconstructive surgery and rehabilitation. His teaching career continued with a prosthetic limb, though he never returned to cage diving. Reynolds' tragic encounter wasn't the only time curiosity proved deadly around apex predators. In the Bahamas, Sophia Rossi would soon discover that some predators show no mercy to thrill seekers. It was September 22, 2016, when the crystal-clear waters surrounding Cat Island, Bahamas, shimmered under the morning Caribbean sun, their deceptive beauty masking the apex predators lurking beneath. This remote stretch of the Bahamas had earned a notorious reputation among thrill seekers for its aggressive oceanic white-tip shark population, drawing adrenaline junkies from around the world to test their courage against nature's most efficient killers. Sophia Rossi, a 31-year-old extreme sports instructor from California, had specifically chosen this location for her friend's bachelorette party adventure. Known throughout her professional skydiving and rock climbing circles for pushing safety limits beyond reason, Sophia possessed an insatiable appetite for danger that had already resulted in numerous close calls with wildlife during her global adventures. Her 3 college friends watched nervously as she boasted about her plans to get closer to the sharks than anyone had dared before. The previous evening's heavy drinking session had left Sophia still intoxicated as their charter boat anchored above the notorious feeding grounds. Despite the captain's repeated safety warnings and her friends' growing concerns, Sophia dismissed all precautions with her characteristic reckless confidence. The shark cage diving operation had attracted multiple oceanic whitetips to the area, their distinctive white-tipped fins cutting through the water with predatory precision. Oceanic white-tip sharks rank among the ocean's most aggressive and opportunistic predators. These massive creatures, capable of reaching lengths exceeding 12 feet, possess incredibly powerful jaws, lined with razor-sharp, serrated teeth, designed to tear through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. Unlike their more cautious reef-dwelling cousins, oceanic whitetips display bold, investigative behavior toward unfamiliar objects, often approaching potential prey with little hesitation. During the morning dive session, several oceanic whitetips circled the submerged cage, while Sophia and her friends observed from within the protective barriers. Unsatisfied with the conventional viewing experience, Sophia ignored all safety protocols and climbed onto the cage's slippery roof, declaring her intention to surf with the sharks. Her friends screamed warnings from below as she balanced precariously on the wet metal surface, arms outstretched for balance. A massive 12-foot female oceanic whitetip, attracted by the unusual movement above, approached from the depths with calculated precision. The shark's powerful tail propelled its muscular body upward as Sophia lost her footing on the treacherous cage top. She plunged directly into the water beside the ascending predator, her splash creating the exact disturbance that triggered the shark's attack response. The oceanic whitetip struck with lightning speed, its massive jaws engulfing Sophia's entire midsection in a crushing bite. The shark's teeth, each measuring over an inch in length, penetrated deep into her torso, while the incredible bite force of over 4,000 pounds per square inch instantly crushed her pelvis and lower spine. Vertebrae shattered like glass under immense pressure as the shark's jaws compressed her body cavity. The predator lifted Sophia completely out of the water, her legs dangling helplessly as blood poured from the massive wounds. The shark's powerful neck muscles shook her violently from side to side, the serrated teeth sawing through muscle, organs, and bone with horrifying efficiency. Her aorta and vena cava severed completely, causing catastrophic internal bleeding that turned the surrounding water crimson. The oceanic whitetip dove deep, dragging Sophia's broken body 40 feet below the surface. The combination of massive blood loss, crushed internal organs, and drowning proved instantly fatal as seawater flooded her punctured lungs. The shark continued its violent thrashing for several more seconds before releasing her lifeless form, which sank slowly toward the ocean floor as the predator circled nearby. Bahamian authorities launched an immediate investigation into the incident, though the remote location and lack of proper safety oversight complicated their efforts. Sophia's family released a brief statement requesting privacy while expressing their devastation over losing someone who lived a life without limits. The charter company faced intense scrutiny over its safety protocols and supervision of intoxicated clients. The tragedy prompted new regulations requiring mandatory sobriety checks for all cage diving participants. Rossi's fatal encounter wasn't the only time Bahamian waters turned deadly. At Tiger Beach, a marine biologist would face a 14-foot tiger shark that would change his life forever. It was April 18, 2017. The crystal-clear waters of Tiger Beach stretched endlessly under the Caribbean sun, 25 miles off the western coast of Grand Bahama Island. This remote diving location had earned its reputation as one of the world's premier shark diving destinations, where the sandy bottom dropped to 40 feet and massive predators congregated during the cooler months. The area's unique geography created perfect hunting conditions, with shallow reefs providing abundant prey and warm currents carrying the scent of food across miles of ocean. Dr. Liam Gallagher descended into these waters with the confidence of a man who had spent 15 years studying apex predators. The 42-year-old marine biologist from Sydney University had published dozens of papers on shark behavior and feeding patterns, establishing himself as one of Australia's leading experts on large marine predators. His methodical approach to research had taken him to dangerous waters across the globe, but Tiger Beach represented the pinnacle of his career ambitions. The site's high concentration of tiger sharks during winter months offered unprecedented opportunities to collect behavioral data and tissue samples that could revolutionize the understanding of predator ecology. Gallagher had chosen this particular expedition to test new sampling equipment designed to collect genetic material without traditional baiting methods. His specialized 6-foot carbon fiber pole featured a spring-loaded collection device that could extract tissue samples through minimal contact. The research vessel anchored above had lowered a reinforced aluminum cage to the seafloor, providing what should have been complete protection, while allowing close observation of the massive predators that ruled these waters. Tiger sharks rank among the ocean's most formidable predators, reaching lengths of 18 feet and weights exceeding 2,000 pounds. These apex hunters possess serrated teeth designed to slice through turtle shells, whale blubber, and virtually any organic material they encounter. Their powerful jaws generate bite forces exceeding 6,000 pounds per square inch, while their muscular bodies can accelerate from stillness to 25 miles per hour in seconds. Unlike many shark species, tigers show little fear of humans and possess an aggressive curiosity that makes them particularly dangerous to researchers. The 14-foot female that approached Gallagher's cage represented a perfect specimen for his research. Her scarred hide and massive girth indicated an experienced predator in her prime, exactly the type of individual whose genetic material could provide crucial insights into tiger shark population dynamics. As she circled the cage with lazy confidence, Gallagher prepared his sampling equipment and extended the pole through the cage bars. The moment the carbon fiber rod made contact with the shark's flank, her demeanor changed instantly. The gentle circling motion exploded into violent aggression as she detected the foreign object against her skin. Her massive tail drove her forward with tremendous force, her mouth opening to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth as she attacked the perceived threat. The pole became her target, but her momentum carried her directly into the cage structure. The impact bent the reinforced aluminum bars inward with a grinding screech of twisted metal. Gallagher's left leg, positioned near the cage wall, became trapped between the bent bars as they compressed around his shin just below the knee. The wetsuit provided no protection as the metal edges cut into his flesh, but worse was yet to come. The tiger shark's attack continued as her jaws clamped down on his trapped leg. Her serrated teeth penetrated through the neoprene wetsuit and into the soft tissue beneath, while the crushing force of her bite fractured both the tibia and fibula bones. Blood clouded the water as her teeth ground against bone, the shark's natural thrashing motion causing additional tissue damage with each movement. Gallagher reached for his diving knife with desperate precision, striking repeatedly at the shark's snout and eye area. Each blow was calculated to target the most sensitive areas, without causing permanent damage to the research specimen. After what seemed like an eternity, but lasted only seconds, the shark released her grip and disappeared into the blue water beyond. The twisted cage bars held Gallagher's mangled leg in a vice-like grip as blood continued to flow from multiple puncture wounds. The dive crew above worked frantically with cutting tools to free him from the compressed metal, while emergency medical protocols were activated aboard the research vessel. The tissue damage was extensive, with the shark's teeth having crushed muscle, severed blood vessels, and created compound fractures in both lower leg bones. Following emergency evacuation to Nassau and subsequent medical treatment in Miami, doctors determined that the extensive bone fragmentation and tissue destruction required amputation below the knee. The Bahamas Maritime Authority launched an investigation into the incident, focusing on safety protocols for scientific diving operations in shark-populated waters. Gallagher's University issued statements supporting improved safety measures for marine research, while the international scientific community debated the risks inherent in close-contact predator studies. The incident sparked renewed discussions about the balance between scientific advancement and researcher safety in extreme environments. Marine biology programs worldwide reviewed their protocols for working with large predators, implementing stricter guidelines for cage diving operations. Gallagher survived his encounter with a 14-foot tiger shark, but at Guadalupe Island, another filmmaker would face an even larger predator with fatal consequences. It was November 8, 2017 in Mexico. The waters surrounding Guadalupe Island churned with an otherworldly darkness as dawn broke over the Pacific. Located 150 miles off the Baja California coast, This remote volcanic island had become a mecca for great white shark encounters during peak season. The water temperature hovered at a perfect 68 degrees, creating ideal conditions for the apex predators that migrated here annually. Kelp forests swayed in the underwater currents, while sea lions barked from rocky outcroppings, their presence attracting the very predators that made these waters legendary. Chloe Kim, a 39-year-old documentary filmmaker from London, stood on the deck of the research vessel Neptune's Eye, adjusting her diving equipment with practiced precision. Her weathered hands betrayed years of dangerous wildlife filming across 6 continents. Kim had built her reputation capturing footage that others deemed impossible, often placing herself in precarious situations for the perfect shot. Her previous documentary about polar bears had earned critical acclaim, but her latest project about African lions had flopped commercially, leaving investors demanding more sensational content. The financial pressure weighed heavily on her shoulders as she prepared for what she hoped would be her career-defining moment. The pressure to deliver had brought Kim to these shark-infested waters during the height of the Great White Season. Her 3-person crew watched nervously as she outlined her plan to film outside the protective cage. The dive operator, Captain Rodriguez, had initially refused her request, but Kim's persistence and additional payment had eventually swayed him. She needed footage that would guarantee her documentary's success, and she believed authentic close-range shots of great whites would provide exactly that dramatic impact. The morning briefing had been tense, with crew members expressing concerns about the unprecedented risk. Great white sharks are among the ocean's most formidable predators, capable of reaching lengths exceeding 20 feet and weights of over 5,000 pounds. Their torpedo-shaped bodies can propel them through water at speeds up to 35 miles per hour. Most critically, their jaws contain up to 300 triangular serrated teeth, arranged in multiple rows, designed to tear through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. These apex predators typically hunt seals and sea lions around Guadalupe Island, using ambush tactics that involve striking from below with tremendous force. Their bite force can exceed 4,000 psi, capable of crushing a small boat. At 10:47 a.m., Kim descended into the crystal-clear water, her handheld camera housing gleaming in the filtered sunlight. The diving cage floated nearby, her crew filming from its safety. Within minutes, a massive female great white, measuring approximately 19 feet in length, emerged from the blue depths. The shark moved with deliberate grace, circling Kim at a distance of roughly 30 feet. Its black eyes remained fixed on the filmmaker as she maneuvered to capture the perfect angle. The predator's scarred hide told stories of countless battles in these unforgiving waters. Kim positioned herself 10 feet from the cage, completely exposed to open water. The great white's circling pattern tightened with each pass, its massive pectoral fins cutting through the water with mechanical precision. Without any warning signs, the shark suddenly accelerated from below, its powerful tail driving it upward at incredible speed. The impact was catastrophic. The great white jaws clamped down on Kim's torso just below her ribcage, the upper teeth penetrating deep into her back while the lower teeth crushed her abdomen. The force of the strike launched both predator and victim above the water's surface before gravity pulled them back down. Kim's camera spiraled away into the depths as the shark's teeth punctured her liver, stomach, and several major blood vessels. The great white began its death roll, rotating its massive body with Kim still trapped in its jaws. The first rotation shattered 3 ribs on her left side. The second roll tore through her wetsuit and opened massive lacerations across her torso. The third and final rotation caused complete organ failure as the shark's serrated teeth severed her spinal cord and punctured her lungs. Blood poured from Kim's wounds, turning the surrounding water crimson. Her wetsuit filled completely with blood as the shark maintained its grip for nearly 2 minutes. The predator's powerful jaw muscles continued to compress, causing additional internal damage with each passing second. Finally, the great white released its grip, allowing Kim's lifeless body to float motionless in the bloodied water. The dive team recovered Kim's body within minutes, but the massive blood loss and catastrophic organ damage had already proven fatal. Her torso bore the unmistakable pattern of great white teeth marks, with wounds measuring over 18 inches across. Mexican authorities launched an immediate investigation into the incident, focusing on the dive operator's decision to allow cage-free diving during peak shark season. Kim's family released a brief statement expressing their grief while acknowledging her lifelong passion for wildlife filmmaking. The footage from her final dive was never released to the public. Environmental groups used the tragedy to highlight the dangers of exploiting wildlife for entertainment purposes. The waters around Guadalupe Island continue to attract thrill seekers and researchers, but Kim's death serves as a stark reminder of the ocean's unforgiving nature. Her story joins a growing list of encounters where human ambition met nature's raw power with devastating consequences. It was October 15, 2016, in Guadalupe Island, Mexico. Far out in the Pacific, 150 miles southwest of Ensenada, the volcanic cliffs of Guadalupe Island rose abruptly from the sea. The island's barren slopes, streaked with shades of red and gray, were a stark contrast to the endless blue around them. Below the surface, the waters were famous, not just for their clarity, but for the great white sharks that gathered here every year. That morning, the ocean was calm, its surface smooth under a pale early sun. The water temperature hovered at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, with visibility stretching nearly 100 feet. For divers and thrill seekers, it was perfect. Several commercial dive boats floated at anchor in the island's sheltered northeastern bay, their decks buzzing with preparation as cages were lowered into the water. Among those aboard the Pacific Hunter was Marcus Chen, a 34-year-old marine biology professor from San Diego. His fascination with apex predators had shaped his career. Years of research papers, countless hours tagging and tracking sharks, but all from the surface. This trip was different. It was a chance to stand just feet away from the animal that had defined much of his professional life. Marcus had been saving for this expedition for 2 years. His wife, Sarah, wasn't thrilled about it, but he'd reassured her that Guadalupe's safety record was flawless. The cages were built to withstand the force of even the largest sharks, and no diver had ever been seriously injured here. The Pacific Hunter left port at 5:30 a.m., carrying 12 passengers and 6 crew members. As the boat closed in on the island, Marcus stood at the bow, watching the jagged cliffs grow taller. By 8:15 a.m., they were anchored in 120 feet of water. Crew members lowered 2 aluminum shark cages into place and began preparing chum, fish oil, blood, and scraps to draw the predators in. Within half an hour, the first dorsal fin sliced the surface. Great white sharks are among the ocean's most efficient hunters. Adults can exceed 20 feet in length and weigh more than 5,000 pounds. They can accelerate to 35 miles per hour in short bursts, propelled by powerful tail fins, and their bite force is measured at over 18,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bone with ease. Guadalupe Island's dense seal population made it one of the most reliable places in the world to see them, and during peak season, several individuals could be spotted in a single day. Later that morning, Marcus stepped into the cage for his second dive of the day. The structure measured 8 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 7 feet tall, suspended off the stern of the boat. The bars were spaced at 12 inches, small enough to keep a shark's head out, or so the design intended. 3 other divers joined Marcus. They wore wetsuits, masks, and surface-supplied air hoses. From the port side, a massive shape emerged, an 18-foot female great white. Her size, scars, and notched dorsal fin identified her instantly to the crew. Deep Blue, one of the most well-known sharks in these waters. She circled once, slow and deliberate, then dropped out of sight beneath the cage. Seconds later, she came back, this time in a full-speed vertical strike. Her snout slammed into the lower corner of the cage with a hollow metallic crack. The impact bent one of the vertical bars outward, just enough to create an opening wider than intended. The jolt threw Marcus against the opposite wall. Deep Blue's head pressed into the gap. Her jaws opened wide, rows of serrated teeth flashing in the filtered sunlight. She lunged, biting Marcus across the left side of his torso. The pressure crushed multiple ribs instantly and punctured his lung, while her teeth tore deep into muscle. A cloud of blood blossomed in the water. The force dragged Marcus partly out of the cage. The other divers flattened themselves against the far wall, their view a blur of thrashing tail and white belly. Deep Blue shook her head violently, working to pull him free. Her jaws released briefly before clamping down again, this time on his upper arm. The bite fractured his humerus and shredded the shoulder joint. The movement spun Marcus sideways, his body now almost entirely outside the cage. With one final surge backward, the bent bar gave way enough for the shark to pull clear. She descended to about 30 feet, Marcus still in her jaws. Down there, she delivered a final bite to his head and neck. The crushing force severed his cervical vertebrae. His body went limp, slipping from her grip and drifting downward. On the surface, crew members had already called for emergency divers. 2 entered the water within moments, descending into a clouded mix of blood and disturbed silt. They reached Marcus in less than a minute, carefully lifting him back to the surface while keeping watch for the shark's return. He was pulled onto the dive platform, and he was pronounced dead on board. Mexican maritime authorities inspected the cage and determined that metal fatigue in the corner joint had weakened the frame. The blow from Deep Blue had been enough to bend the bar outward. New regulations were introduced soon after: reinforced corner construction, reduced bar spacing, and mandatory pre-dive inspections for all commercial operators. Marcus's family later set up a small marine conservation fund in his name, reflecting the passion that had drawn him to Guadalupe Island. His death became a sobering reminder that even with the best precautions, the ocean's apex predator could still find its way through. Marcus's death led many dive operators to quietly review their own safety protocols. Not long after, off the coast of Hawaii, another cage dive would push both gear and human endurance to the brink. It was May 28, 2014, off the north shore of Oahu, Hawaii. 10 minutes out from Haleiwa Harbor, the tour boat idled beyond the reef line, where the deep blue Pacific rose and fell in long, even swells. Trade winds brushed the surface into a glassy chop, and the sun burned through scattered clouds, turning the water a clear cobalt. Below, the seafloor dropped quickly from pale sand to dark blue water, with bait schools flickering like mercury beneath the hull. The water temperature hovered near 77 degrees Fahrenheit, and visibility extended more than 70 feet, ideal conditions for spotting approaching predators. To the west, a thin line of whitewater marked breaking surf over the outer reef. To the east, the green spine of the Ko'olau Range faded into haze. A chum slick feathered off the stern, drifting down current and out into deeper water. Rebecca Becky Lawson, 36, had flown in from Seattle to finish a month-long feature on adventure travel across the islands. A certified scuba diver and confident swimmer, she'd never been face-to-face with large predatory sharks. Shark cage diving, offered out of Haleiwa, was slated as the final entry on her bucket list, one last adventure before flying home. Just after sunrise, the boat left the harbor and headed into open water. The crew gave a safety briefing, explaining cage entry, hand placement, and camera use. The cage, inspected and secured to the transom, floated on sturdy pontoons. Becky suited up, checked her gear, and joined 2 other guests for the first rotation. Tiger sharks are among Hawaii's most common large predatory sharks. Females can exceed 14 feet and weigh more than 1,000 pounds. Their broad heads, keen electroreception, and slow, confident approach make them consummate investigators. Unlike great whites, which often ambush from depth then disengage, tiger sharks are notorious for close passes, repeated bump checks, and opportunistic bites on floating objects. Becky entered on the second rotation. The cage settled with its top frame just above the surface. She gripped the interior rail with her left hand, braced her fins against the lower crossbar. Small jacks and mackerel swirled in the slick. 5 minutes in, a shadow rose from the blue, a large female tiger shark, approximately 13 to 14 feet, moving with slow, deliberate strokes. She circled once, passed the stern, and glided along the cage's port side at arm's length, pectoral fins steady, tail sweeping in measured arcs. The crew kept the bait line outside the cage footprint, drawing the shark away on a controlled path. On the third pass, she altered her line, turning broadside, then angled in. Her snout touched the cage corner in a probing bump, producing a dull thud that echoed through the frame. The upper corner bracket flexed slightly. A hose clamp on the corner mesh shifted under load. The shark struck again, harder this time, rattling the corner stanchion. A palm-wide gap opened where the mesh met the bar, and water surged through. Becky tightened her grip as the cage rolled in the swell. The tiger shark came head-on, biting across the exposed seam of the cage. Her teeth clamped onto Becky's right forearm, tearing through neoprene and into flesh. Skin and muscle split under the pressure of the serrations. Blood streamed into the water in thin red threads. The shark pulled, testing. Becky's arm lodged against the inner crossbar, preventing a clean draw. The jaw released and rebit slightly higher on the forearm, deeper. A short shake followed, a lateral whip, tearing lacerations into parallel tracks. The cage pivoted on its hinge as swell lifted the transom. One of the crew dropped a weighted push-pull and drove it against the shark's head. The contact redirected her angle, forcing a partial disengagement. The tiger shark backed off, swept a low circle, then came again along the port side. This time she angled upward at the mid-frame. Her head rode over the lower bar, and her mouth closed around the cage rail itself, testing metal with a brief crush. The frame held. She let go, veered, and passed down current. Blood traced a faint ribbon off the stern. Becky's forearm bled steadily. The wetsuit sleeve peeled back to reveal deep punctures and torn tissue. A deckhand clipped a retrieval line to the cage, and the skipper powered forward to push the shark away. The crew winched the cage up and pulled Becky onto the deck. The crew applied a pressure dressing and packed the deepest wounds with hemostatic gauze while monitoring her vitals en route to Hailiwa. The shark appeared twice more behind the boat before vanishing into open water. At the harbor, EMS transferred Becky to Wahiawa General, then to a higher-level facility in Honolulu. Surgery cleaned and repaired the tendon damage, fixed a hairline radius fracture, and placed drains. She was discharged in a splint with a long course of antibiotics and months of hand therapy ahead. State boating officers documented the incident, noting the corner mesh had been secured with corroded hose clamps and inadequate backup. The operator replaced all corner mesh with welded stainless panels, added extra lashing, and updated safety briefings to keep arms well inside inner rails. North Shore operators stressed that tiger shark approaches are common, but injuries are rare with proper equipment and positioning. Becky left with lasting scars, a reminder that even controlled wildlife encounters carry real risk. In the shark-filled waters of Gansby, South Africa, another cage dive was about to turn dangerously real. It was March 18, 2013, off the rugged coast of Gansby, South Africa, a place often called the Great White Capital of the world. The waters here were a shimmering turquoise on the surface, but beneath lay a different world, colder, darker, and ruled by one of the ocean's most efficient predators. The charter boat. Southern wind floated just beyond the kelp line, anchored in calm swells. The horizon stretched endlessly, but closer in, the sea was restless, stirred by currents that carried the scent of fish and seal colonies from nearby Dyer Island. The air smelled faintly of chum, a mix of fish oils and tuna heads, drifting from the bait box tied off the stern to draw in the day's main attraction. 35-year-old Olivia Hayes had flown in from Melbourne for her first solo holiday in years. A marketing consultant by trade, she'd spent months buried under deadlines and late nights before finally taking her friend's advice to book something wild, something unforgettable. Shark cage diving hadn't been part of the original plan. She signed up only after meeting a group of backpackers in Cape Town who swore it was the ultimate adrenaline rush. Olivia wasn't afraid of the ocean. She'd grown up swimming in Port Phillip Bay, but the thought of being face-to-face with a great white was another matter. Still, with the forecast promising calm seas and clear visibility, she decided it was now or never. The morning began with coffee on deck, followed by a briefing from the dive master. He outlined the cage's safety features, the importance of keeping hands and cameras inside the bars, and the procedures if a shark came in close. The message was clear. The predators were drawn to the bait, not the divers. But caution was non-negotiable. Olivia suited up in a thick wetsuit, the neoprene snug against her skin. The cage was bolted to the side of the boat, half submerged in the water. From above, it looked solid. Steel bars spaced just enough for a clear view, but tight enough to keep a shark's head from fitting through. She was in the second rotation, watching from the deck as two other divers slipped under the surface. Moments later, a shadow passed beneath them. A female great white, perhaps 14 feet long, circling with the slow, deliberate grace of a seasoned hunter. Great white sharks are the largest predatory fish on Earth, capable of speeds over 25 miles per hour and bites strong enough to crush a seal in seconds. In cage diving encounters, they often approach out of curiosity, testing their surroundings with quick bursts of speed or investigative bumps. While direct attacks on cages are rare, the combination of bait, noise, and human presence can sometimes trigger more aggressive behavior. By the time it was Olivia's turn, the great white had been joined by a slightly smaller male. The crew lowered her and 3 other divers into the cage. The cold water pressed in instantly, muffling sound except for the hiss of air bubbles. She gripped the inside bar, scanning the blue-green haze for movement. The female came first, gliding out of the gloom. Her eyes were black, unblinking, her body flexing in perfect arcs. Olivia watched, transfixed, as the shark passed within inches, the scars along her flank visible through the water. Then, without warning, the bait line snapped taut. The shark lunged, jaws opening wide, and in the chaos, one of the upper corner joints of the cage gave way with a metallic groan. The impact bent a section of the frame outward just enough for her snout to push through. Olivia felt a sudden burst of water as the shark's head broke the plane between them, her teeth clamping onto Olivia's left shoulder. The force slammed her backward into the opposite side of the cage. Pain radiated down her arm, hot and sharp. But she didn't have time to react before the shark thrashed, twisting the bent bars further. The dive master above was already yelling for a rapid haul-up. 2 crew members cranked the winch, but the cage rocked violently as the shark pulled sideways. The other divers kicked toward the far corner, giving Olivia as much space as possible. The shark released her shoulder but struck again, this time clamping onto her forearm. The pressure crushed muscle and bone. She felt the snap even through the adrenaline. Blood clouded the water, drawing the smaller male into a rapid pass just outside the cage. One crewman swung the bait pole hard against the shark's snout, forcing her to recoil just long enough for the winch to lift the cage halfway out of the water. The shark slid back into the depths, the bent corner of the cage hanging like a broken rib. On deck, the crew pulled Olivia out first. Her wetsuit was shredded across the left arm and shoulder, deep lacerations exposing muscle. Her forearm hung limp, fractured in 2 places. She was conscious but silent, her breathing ragged. A pressure bandage went on immediately while the captain radioed for a medevac. The boat sped back toward shore, every wave slamming the hull as the crew worked to keep her stable. She was airlifted to a Cape Town hospital where surgeons spent hours repairing torn muscles and setting fractures. The bite force had severed several tendons, and nerve damage meant months of rehabilitation ahead. South African maritime authorities later inspected the cage and confirmed that a corroded weld had weakened the joint that bent during the strike. The incident led to new safety checks and reinforced corners on all licensed shark diving cages in the region. Olivia eventually regained partial use of her arm, though the thick, pale ridges running from shoulder to wrist remained, a permanent reminder of the day she faced one of the ocean's most powerful predators, and survived. That narrow escape in Gonsby was a victory in its own right. Across the Atlantic in Cape Cod, a surge in great white numbers was about to bring the danger frighteningly close to shore. It was September 7, 2010, in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The wide arc of Nauset Beach curved along the Atlantic coast, its golden sand stretching for miles under a pale, late summer sky. Onshore breezes carried the smell of salt and seaweed, and just beyond the surf, the waters shifted from turquoise shallows to a deep, shadowed blue. In recent years, these waters had become known not just for pristine beauty and rolling surf, but for something far more dangerous: the steady return of the great white shark. The barrier beaches of Cape Cod are a natural convergence zone for predator and prey. Offshore sandbars, deep troughs, and strong tidal currents create prime hunting grounds for the seals that haul out by the hundreds along Monomoy Island and Chatham Harbor. And where there are seals, great whites follow. That summer, multiple sightings had been recorded almost daily. Dorsal fins slicing through the surface, seal carcasses washing ashore, and warning flags flying along the lifeguard stands. 30-year-old Ryan Carter was a schoolteacher from Boston, taking one last trip to the Cape before the school year began. He'd been coming to Nauset Beach since childhood, learning to bodyboard in the gentle shore break before graduating to a longboard in his teens. Confident in the water, Ryan prided himself on being shark smart. He followed posted advisories, avoided swimming at dawn and dusk, and never strayed too far from shore. That Thursday morning was clear and warm, the first hints of autumn hidden behind summer's lingering heat. Ryan arrived just after 9 a.m., when the beach was still quiet. A few families were setting up umbrellas higher up the sand, and a pair of surfers paddled out beyond the break. The lifeguard tower stood tall, a red warning flag fluttering. Not an outright closure, but a reminder of recent shark activity. Ryan waxed his board, adjusted the Velcro on his leash, and waded into the knee-deep surf, the cool Atlantic washing over his feet. For the next hour, the session was idyllic, waist-high waves rolling in clean and steady. Ryan caught ride after ride, paddling back out each time with the rhythm of someone who had done this for decades. The water was slightly murky from an overnight swell, visibility dropping to less than 10 feet below the surface. The great white shark, capable of reaching lengths over 20 feet and weights exceeding 2 tons. In the North Atlantic, their presence along Cape Cod has surged in the last decade, drawn by booming seal populations and warming waters. They are ambush predators, often attacking from below with explosive speed, using their serrated teeth to incapacitate prey. While attacks on humans are rare, the similarity in size and silhouette between a seal and a prone surfer makes cases of mistaken identity a persistent danger. At 10:42 a.m., Ryan was sitting just outside the breaking waves, straddling his board with his legs dangling in the water. He turned his head toward shore, watching a family of 4 splash in the shallows, unaware that just beyond him, something massive was closing the distance. The shark struck from directly below. In a split second, the water erupted. Ryan and his board launched upward as a 13-foot great white's jaws clamped around his right thigh and board rail simultaneously. The initial bite severed his femoral artery, shredding muscle and splintering bone. Ryan was pulled under in a violent thrash, the shark's head shaking side to side. His board leash snapped, and a plume of blood swirled into the churning water. The predator released him momentarily, circling with slow, deliberate arcs before coming in again. The second strike targeted his midsection. Massive jaws enveloped Ryan from hip to rib cage, crushing his pelvis and breaking several ribs instantly. The bite force ruptured internal organs, and the sudden rush of water into his punctured lungs made it impossible to cry out. The shark rolled to one side, dragging Ryan deeper. At approximately 15 feet down, the final bite came, a crushing clamp on his upper torso and left shoulder. His collarbone snapped, his upper arm nearly severed. The predator then released, letting his body drift upward, motionless, toward the surface. From the beach, lifeguards had already launched into action. A whistle blast cut through the air as two rescue swimmers sprinted into the surf, paddling hard toward the crimson stain spreading offshore. A surfer nearby reached Ryan first, pulling his limp body onto his board and paddling toward the rescuers. Ryan was brought to shore within minutes, but the damage was catastrophic. CPR began immediately as lifeguards worked to control the massive blood loss. Paramedics arrived within 5 minutes, applying tourniquets and continuing resuscitation efforts. Despite their work, Ryan was pronounced dead at the scene. The injuries to his major arteries and internal organs were beyond saving. Nauset Beach was closed for the remainder of the day, with patrol boats sweeping the area to monitor for further shark activity. In the following days, Cape Cod residents and tourists voiced mixed reactions. Some called for expanded shark mitigation efforts, including sonar detection buoys and seasonal closures. Others argued that the ocean was the shark's domain and that human presence carried an inherent risk. Ryan's family released a short statement, urging the public to remain cautious and respectful of the marine environment. Cape Cod's encounter proved how close danger can come to shore. Off South Africa's Aliwal Shoal, a diver would learn that even far from land, the ocean can close in fast and leave scars that last. It was August 5, 2016, 20 miles south of Durban. The open coastline of KwaZulu-Natal gave way to rugged headlands and the warm surge of the Indian Ocean. Beneath the surface lay Aliwal Shoal, a submerged reef system famed among divers for its coral gardens, dense schools of fish, and the constant presence of apex predators. Rising abruptly from the seabed, the shoal's ridges and caves created a perfect hunting ground. That morning, a mild swell rolled in from the south. Suspended silt reduced underwater visibility to just 25 feet, while the current carried baitfish in glittering shoals across the reef, prime conditions for sharks to ambush prey. Michael O'Brien, a 39-year-old mining engineer from Perth, had been diving for over 2 decades. A skilled freediver and spearfisher, he'd competed internationally, earning a reputation for precision and calm under pressure. While much of his experience came from spearfishing alone, this trip to South Africa was for something different. A scuba exploration of Aliwal Shoal's deeper ridges, where tiger sharks, bull sharks, and dusky sharks were known to patrol. The day began before sunrise at Umkomas Harbor. The dive boat's twin outboards pushed through the chop towards the marine protected area, the sun just breaking over the eastern horizon. On board, the crew went over the dive plan: 2 descents along the southern drop-off, a mid-water drift, and a return over the reef top. Visibility was marginal, but the baitfish activity meant there was a good chance of seeing larger marine life. By 7:30 a.m., Michael was geared up and rolled back into the water. Dusky sharks are among the largest members of the Requiem shark family, capable of reaching over 12 feet in length and weighing more than 750 pounds. Often mistaken for bull sharks at a distance, duskies are wide-ranging, opportunistic predators, feeding on fish, rays, and occasionally smaller sharks. While not typically aggressive toward divers, they are curious, and in murky water, their investigative bites can be catastrophic. Michael descended to 60 feet, the reef rising like a jagged spine beneath him. Soft corals waved in the current. A school of kingfish flashed past, followed by the distant shadow of something larger. The first 20 minutes passed uneventfully, The occasional reef shark cruised the edge of visibility, never closing the gap. Then, from his left, a dark shape materialized out of the haze. The profile was unmistakable, deep-bodied, with a rounded snout and powerful tail strokes. A large, dusky shark, perhaps 10 feet long, was closing in at a steady pace. At first, Michael assumed it would pass, as most sharks did, but instead, it arced around behind him. The attack happened without warning. In a sudden burst of speed, the shark struck from below and to the side, jaws clamping onto Michael's left calf. The force spun him sideways, bubbles exploding from his regulator. Rows of serrated teeth punched through neoprene and deep into muscle, leaving parallel arcs of punctures. The shark released, circling tightly. Michael tried to kick upward, but the movement stirred the water, flashing his silver fin, possibly triggering the second strike. This time the shark came in from the front, jaws half open. It seized the lower half of his right fin along with a strip of his wetsuit, narrowly missing a second major bite to his leg. The impact jolted him backward, and instinctively Michael kicked free, losing the damaged fin. Blood drifted upward in red threads. The boat crew, seeing the disturbance from above, accelerated toward his position. A safety diver dropped in, intercepting Michael halfway up. The Dusky made one more slow pass before fading into the murk. Michael was pulled over the gunwale and laid out on the deck. His left leg bled heavily, muscle fibers visible through the torn skin. A pressure dressing slowed the flow while the skipper pushed the throttles toward Umkomaas. At the dock, paramedics stabilized him and arranged for an airlift to Durban's Inkosi Albert Luthuli Central Hospital. Imaging showed deep lacerations to the calf and partial tearing of the gastrocnemius muscle. Surgeons spent over 2 hours irrigating the wounds, removing embedded tooth fragments, and repairing damaged tissue. Marine authorities investigated and found no provocation or feeding activity in the area. The strike was likely a case of mistaken identity in low visibility. Operators were reminded to keep divers grouped closely, avoid reflective gear in murky water, and ensure safety divers maintained close range during descents. Michael left the hospital on crutches, facing months of rehabilitation. His survival was credited to the crew's rapid extraction and immediate bleeding control. The scars on his leg would remain, a permanent reminder that even in controlled dives with experienced teams, the ocean's predators could still close the distance in seconds. These 5 incidents highlight the ocean's unpredictability and the strength of its apex predators. Though rare, each case offers lessons in shark behavior and the need for strict safety protocols. The morning of August 12, 2014, dawned with perfect beach conditions at Sand City Beach, California. Golden sunlight danced across the Pacific surface, and gentle offshore breezes created the kind of pristine waves that made families flock to the coastline. For the Walsh family, this was meant to be the perfect ending to their summer vacation. One last day of ocean fun before returning to their routine in Monterey. Emma Walsh, 7, and her little sister, Chloe, 5, were the kind of children who lived for the water. Both were confident swimmers who had spent the entire week mastering their boogie boarding skills at safer, more crowded beaches. Their father, Dr. Michael Walsh, was a marine biologist at the prestigious Monterey Bay Aquarium, making him intimately familiar with the local marine ecosystem, including the great white sharks that patrolled these waters. Their mother, Sarah, was an elementary school teacher who had carefully planned every detail of their vacation. The girls were inseparable, with Emma taking on the protective big sister role, while Chloe's infectious laughter could be heard echoing across any beach they visited. The family had spent the morning packing their beach gear one final time, the girls excitedly discussing their plans to catch the biggest wave ever on their last day. Dr. Walsh had checked the marine conditions report that morning, noting the presence of elephant seals in the area, but dismissing it as routine information. Emma's board was bright pink with purple stripes, while Chloe's was yellow with cartoon dolphins, gifts from their grandparents the previous Christmas. But on this fateful day, the family made a decision that would change their lives forever. Instead of returning to their usual crowded beach, they chose an isolated section of Sand City Beach during the late afternoon golden hour, precisely when great white sharks become most active in their hunt for prey. Dr. Walsh, despite his expertise, was focused on giving his daughters one last perfect beach experience and overlooked the warning signs, elephant seals hauling out nearby, the isolated location, and the time of day when predators ruled the waters. At 5:20 p.m., as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Emma and Chloe paddled their boogie boards 75 yards offshore into 12 feet of crystal-clear water. Their dark wetsuits and the silhouettes of their boards created the perfect illusion. From below, they looked exactly like young elephant seals, the preferred prey of the massive great white sharks that patrolled this coastline. The girls were laughing and calling to each other, completely unaware that they were being observed from the depths below. Great white sharks possess one of nature's most sophisticated sensory systems, capable of detecting a single drop of blood in 25 gallons of water and sensing the electrical impulses of a beating heart from over 100 yards away. When hunting, they rely primarily on vision and mistake identification, approaching potential prey from below, where the silhouette against the surface light triggers their investigative response. Their hunting strategy is simple but effective: a single powerful bite to determine if the target is suitable prey, followed by retreat to allow the victim to weaken before returning to feed. A 14-foot great white, drawn by the nearby seal colony, approached from the depths with the silent efficiency that had made its species the ocean's apex predator for millions of years. The attack came without warning. The great white struck Emma first in a classic investigative bite, its massive jaws clamping down on her and her board with enough force to launch her small body through the air. Her terrified scream pierced the afternoon calm as she hit the water, blood immediately beginning to cloud the pristine blue around her. The shark, following its instinctual behavior, immediately released Emma and retreated to assess whether she was suitable prey. But the damage was already done. The single bite had caused massive trauma to her torso and leg. Chloe, only 20 feet away, heard her sister's cry and began paddling frantically toward her, her movement and Emma's blood in the water maintaining the shark's interest in the area. Dr. Walsh, who had been watching proudly from shore 200 yards away, immediately dove into the surf and began swimming toward his daughters with desperate strokes. Sarah screamed from the beach, alerting other beachgoers to the emergency unfolding in the water. Nearby surfers, alerted by the screams and commotion, paddled toward the scene as fast as they could. The great white, now confused by the multiple targets and increased activity, made a second investigative approach toward Chloe before ultimately departing the area. Typical behavior when great whites determine their targets aren't seals. The rescue that followed was heroic and swift. Surfers reached the girls within 3 minutes, immediately pulling them from the water and applying pressure to their wounds while calling for emergency assistance. Emma, who had sustained the more severe injuries from the direct bite, was airlifted to a trauma center where she underwent multiple surgeries. Despite the medical team's best efforts, she succumbed to her injuries after 2 days in intensive care. Chloe survived with severe lacerations to her leg and arm, requiring months of physical therapy but making a full recovery. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the marine biology community, with Dr. Walsh struggling to reconcile his scientific understanding of shark behavior with the personal devastation of losing his daughter. The family eventually became advocates for shark conservation and beach safety education, understanding that the great white had simply been following its natural instincts. But while this family learned the hard way about the ocean's apex predators, another encounter was about to unfold in the pre-dawn darkness, where a young surfer would face the ultimate test of survival against nature's perfect killing machine. October 3rd, 2015, brought an eerie calm to Surf Beach in Lompoc, California. A thick marine layer had rolled in overnight, creating the kind of mysterious, fog-shrouded conditions that experienced surfers both loved and feared. The visibility was poor, but the waves were clean and consistent, exactly the kind of setup that drew dedicated surfers to paddle out before the rest of the world awakened. Tyler Brooks, 22, was the epitome of a California surfer, a UC Santa Barbara student with sun-bleached hair and the kind of easy confidence that came from years of riding waves. Tyler had been surfing competitively competitively since high school and worked part-time at a local surf shop to fund his passion. He was known among his friends for his dawn patrol sessions, those early morning surfs when the ocean belonged entirely to those brave enough to face the unknown conditions. Tyler had been surfing this particular break for 2 years and considered himself intimately familiar with its moods and dangers. That morning, Tyler had woken at 5:30 a.m. in his shared apartment near campus, quietly gathering his wetsuit and board while his roommates slept. He'd grabbed a quick energy bar and coffee, checking the surf reports on his phone that showed promising conditions despite the marine layer. His girlfriend had texted him the night before, asking him to wait for her to join him, but Tyler was eager to catch the early session before his afternoon classes. But Tyler made a critical error in judgment that morning. Despite knowing that October was peak great white season along the California coast, and despite recent shark sightings reported by other surfers, he chose to paddle out alone. The nearby elephant seal rookery, just 300 yards south of his position, was in the middle of pupping season, a time when massive great whites patrolled the area like underwater sentinels, hunting for the protein-rich seals that represented their preferred prey. At 6:45 a.m., as the first pale light began to penetrate the marine layer, Tyler paddled through the murky water to his favorite spot 100 yards offshore. The poor visibility meant he could barely see 10 feet in any direction, but he knew the break well enough to navigate by feel and sound. He sat on his board in the lineup, waiting for the next set of waves, completely unaware that he was being observed from below by one of the ocean's most efficient predators. Great white sharks are ambush predators that rely heavily on the element of surprise, typically attacking from directly below at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour. Their attacks are so explosive that they can launch their entire 2-ton body completely out of the water. A 15-foot great white shark, drawn to the area by the nearby elephant seal colony, had been patrolling these waters since before dawn. To the shark's ancient sensory system, Tyler's silhouette against the dim morning light looked exactly like a young elephant seal, the perfect target for an investigative strike. The attack was swift and powerful. The great white struck from directly below with explosive force, its jaws clamping down on Tyler's leg in a single, crushing bite. The impact lifted Tyler partially out of the water before the shark immediately released him and retreated. Classic great white behavior when the predator realizes its target isn't a seal. Tyler managed one agonized scream that echoed across the foggy coastline as he found himself in the water with a severely damaged leg, his surfboard floating nearby in pieces. A jogger on the beach, barely visible through the marine layer, heard Tyler's cry and immediately called 911. Despite the poor visibility, Tyler's survival instincts kicked in. Using his remaining strength and his damaged surfboard as flotation, he began swimming toward shore, leaving a trail of blood that could have attracted the shark back. Fortunately, the great white had already departed the area, following typical post-attack behavior. Tyler's competitive swimming background proved crucial in those terrifying minutes as he fought to stay conscious and keep moving toward shore. He used techniques from his water safety training, controlling his breathing and conserving energy while applying pressure to his wounded leg. The cold water actually helped slow his blood loss, though hypothermia was becoming a serious concern. Coast Guard rescue swimmers reached Tyler within 15 minutes, finding him conscious but in severe shock from blood loss. The single bite had caused massive damage to his leg, severing major arteries and crushing bone. But quick medical response and Tyler's own determination kept him alive during the critical first hour. He was airlifted to a trauma center where surgeons worked for 8 hours to save his leg and his life. Tyler survived the attack but required multiple surgeries and months of rehabilitation. He eventually returned to surfing, though never again alone and always with increased respect for the ocean's apex predators. His experience highlighted the extreme danger of solo surfing during peak great white season. However, while Tyler's story had a positive outcome, another waterman was about to discover that creating a blood trail in predator-rich waters could lead to an encounter with an even more aggressive species of shark. May 18, 2016 brought perfect conditions to the waters off Islamorada in the Florida Keys. The sun blazed overhead in a cloudless sky, and the crystal-clear water offered visibility extending 60 feet in every direction. Ideal conditions for spearfishing in one of America's most productive fishing grounds. The gentle current and calm seas made it a perfect day for freediving, but beneath the surface, apex predators were already beginning to stir. Carlos Mendoza, 28, was living his dream as head chef at one of the Key's most exclusive restaurants, where his reputation for serving the freshest local fish had made him a rising star in the culinary world. Carlos was passionate about sourcing his own ingredients, spending his weekends spearfishing to provide unique catches for his restaurant's special menus. His friends described him as meticulous and safety-conscious, though he occasionally dove solo when his schedule didn't align with his regular diving partners. That morning, Carlos had loaded his boat with all his spearfishing gear, including his custom-made spear gun and emergency flotation device. He'd planned to meet his regular diving partner, but a last-minute family emergency had left Carlos diving alone. He'd considered postponing the trip, but the perfect conditions and his restaurant's need for fresh fish for the weekend menu convinced him to proceed solo. Carlos made a decision that would put him in extreme danger. He continued spearfishing alone after successfully catching several large fish, creating an extended blood trail in waters known to be patrolled by tiger sharks. At 2:15 p.m., Carlos had been diving for 3 hours in the productive waters 4 miles offshore. His success had been remarkable. 3 large fish hung from the stringer attached to his weight belt, including a sizable grouper and 2 snappers that would have been the pride of any spear fisherman. But with each successful catch, Carlos was unknowingly creating a blood trail that extended over 100 yards as he moved between dive spots. Tiger sharks are known as the wastebaskets of the sea because they will eat almost anything, from sea turtles and seals to license plates and tin cans. They possess incredibly powerful jaws, capable of crushing sea turtle shells, and are responsible for the second highest number of attacks on humans after great whites. Unlike great whites, tiger sharks are less likely to release their prey after an initial bite, making encounters with them particularly dangerous for humans. Fatigue was beginning to set in from repeated deep dives to 40 feet, and Carlos was resting at the surface, floating on his back while catching his breath before his next dive. The blood from his catch continued to seep into the water around him, creating an olfactory beacon that could be detected by sharks from over a mile away. He was completely unaware that an 11-foot tiger shark had been following his scent trail for the past 15 minutes, closing in with the patient determination of a perfect predator. Carlos had just finished eating a quick snack and was preparing to make one final dive before heading back to shore when he noticed the water around him had become unusually still. Fish that had been abundant throughout the day had suddenly disappeared, and an eerie quiet had settled over the area, classic signs that a large predator was nearby, though Carlos didn't immediately recognize the warning signs. The attack came suddenly as Carlos prepared for another dive. The tiger shark struck from below, its powerful jaws clamping down on Carlos's leg and the fish stringer simultaneously. Unlike a great white's typical bite and release pattern, the tiger shark maintained its grip, thrashing violently as it tried to secure what it perceived as a large, struggling prey item. Carlos fought desperately, using his spear gun to strike the shark's head while trying to free himself from its jaws. The tiger shark's grip was powerful, but after nearly 30 seconds of struggle, it released Carlos and focused on the fish stringer, which it quickly consumed. Carlos, severely injured but conscious, managed to inflate his emergency flotation device and activate his distress beacon. His dive buddy, who had been fishing from their boat 300 yards away, heard the commotion and immediately started the engine, racing toward Carlos's location. He reached the scene within 2 minutes, finding Carlos conscious but bleeding heavily from deep lacerations to his leg and torso. The tiger shark had departed with its meal, following typical behavior after securing food. Emergency medical response was immediate, with Coast Guard helicopters airlifting Carlos to a trauma center within 45 minutes of the attack. He survived after multiple surgeries and months of recovery, though he never returned to solo spearfishing. However, while Carlos learned to respect the ocean's predators through painful experience, another victim was about to discover that even military training couldn't protect against the ocean's most unpredictable predator. July 9th, 2017, dawned hot and humid at Naval Air Station Pensacola, Florida. The previous night's thunderstorms had finally cleared, leaving behind calm seas but murky water water conditions that should have raised red flags for the planned training exercise. The heavy rains had created freshwater runoff that turned the normally clear bay water brackish, exactly the environment that attracts one of the ocean's most aggressive and unpredictable predators. Petty Officer Sarah Kim, 25, was the kind of Navy diver that instructors pointed to as an example of excellence. With 4 years of military diving experience and over 200 training dives logged without incident, Sarah was known for her calm professionalism and meticulous attention to safety protocols. Her fellow divers respected her expertise in underwater demolition, and she had recently been selected for advanced training that would have advanced her career significantly. That morning, Sarah had arrived early at the dive facility to conduct pre-dive equipment checks and review the training objectives with her team. She'd noticed the murky water conditions during her preliminary assessment, but trusted that the marine wildlife reconnaissance had been properly conducted. The training exercise was part of a critical certification program, and postponement would have meant weeks of rescheduling for the entire team. The Navy training exercise proceeded despite conditions that, in hindsight, should have triggered additional safety protocols. While marine wildlife reconnaissance was conducted, the recent storm conditions and brackish water created an environment that was particularly attractive to bull sharks, aggressive predators that had likely moved into the bay following the freshwater inflow and abundant bait fish stirred up by the storms. At 10:30 a.m., during what should have been a routine underwater navigation exercise, Sarah found herself separated from her dive partner in 15 feet of murky water. The storm runoff had reduced visibility to less than 8 feet, making it challenging but not impossible to maintain visual contact with her teammate. Following standard protocol, Sarah surfaced to regroup and signal her position, but she found herself 100 yards from the training boat in water that had been transformed by the freshwater inflow. Sarah had been executing a complex underwater demolition simulation when the separation occurred. Her dive partner had been investigating a training target on the opposite side of a submerged structure when the current shifted, carrying Sarah further from their planned route. She'd attempted to signal underwater using standard hand signals, but the murky conditions made visual communication impossible beyond a few feet. Bull sharks are unique among shark species because they can tolerate both fresh and salt water, allowing them to venture far up rivers and into bays where other sharks cannot survive. They are responsible for more attacks on humans than any shark species except great whites, and their aggressive territorial nature makes them particularly dangerous in shallow, murky water. A 9-foot bull shark, drawn into the bay by the freshwater flow and the abundance of bait fish stirred up by the storm, had been patrolling the area since dawn. When Sarah surfaced, her movements and the electrical impulses from her equipment immediately attracted the predator's attention. Bull sharks are known for their aggressive investigative behavior, especially in brackish water, where they feel most comfortable. The attack was swift, but followed the typical bull shark pattern of a single powerful bite. The shark struck Sarah at the surface, its jaws clamping down on her torso before immediately releasing her. Investigative behavior similar to great whites, but with the bull shark's characteristic aggression. Sarah's emergency beacon activated automatically as she fought to stay conscious, her military training helping her remain calm despite the severe trauma. Sarah's years of military conditioning proved crucial in those first critical moments. Despite the shock and pain, she managed to maintain her position at the surface and control her breathing, preventing panic that could have worsened her situation. She used her emergency whistle to signal distress while applying pressure to her wounds with techniques learned in combat first aid training. Her dive partner surfaced 45 seconds later and immediately called for emergency extraction while applying direct pressure to Sarah's wounds. The support boat reached her location within 3 minutes, and the dive team's immediate first aid response was textbook perfect. Sarah remained conscious throughout the rescue, her military conditioning helping her survive the initial trauma and blood loss. Emergency medical response was rapid and professional. Sarah was airlifted to the Naval Hospital within 20 minutes, where trauma surgeons worked for 6 hours to repair the damage from the bull shark's bite. She survived the attack, but required multiple surgeries and extensive rehabilitation. After 18 months of recovery, she returned to limited duty, eventually becoming an instructor in dive safety protocols. The incident led to immediate changes in Navy diving protocols, including enhanced marine life surveys before all training exercises in coastal waters and mandatory buddy system enforcement in low visibility conditions. predators. Sarah's survival highlighted both the importance of proper emergency response and the unpredictable nature of bull shark encounters in brackish water. But while Sarah's military training and quick medical response saved her life, another victim was about to discover that sometimes the greatest danger comes not from wild predators, but from our own overconfidence. September 14th, 2018 brought perfect conditions to the Neptune Islands off South Australia. Crystal clear water, calm seas, and the kind of visibility that made cage diving operators smile with anticipation. The Southern Ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, its deep blue surface hiding one of the world's most concentrated populations of great white sharks. For tourists seeking the ultimate adrenaline rush, there was no better place on Earth to come face to face with the ocean's apex predator. Jennifer Park, 31, was living out her bucket list dreams during a solo vacation to Australia. A successful marketing executive from Los Angeles, Jennifer had worked tirelessly for years to afford this once-in-a-lifetime trip, and cage diving with great whites represented the pinnacle of adventure tourism for her. She was a certified scuba diver with 30 logged dives, mostly in the tropical waters of the Caribbean and Hawaii. But she had never encountered anything more dangerous than a reef shark. Jennifer had spent the previous evening at the dive operator's briefing session, watching videos of previous cage diving expeditions and learning about great white behavior. She'd been fascinated by the footage of massive sharks gliding past the protective cages, their powerful forms moving with surprising grace through the water. The dive operator had emphasized safety protocols repeatedly, but Jennifer was focused more on the excitement than the warnings. The cage diving operation was professional and safety-focused, with multiple backup systems and experienced dive masters. Jennifer had undergone thorough safety briefings and was equipped with proper emergency signaling devices. The cage itself was a robust steel structure designed to keep tourists safe while allowing close observation of great whites with multiple exit points and constant surface support. At 11:45 a.m., during what had started as a routine cage diving session, the ocean around the Neptune Islands suddenly became a theater of primal power. A massive 16-foot great white shark, larger than any the crew had seen that season, approached the cage with the confident curiosity typical of dominant predators. The shark began displaying classic investigative behavior, circling the cage and occasionally bumping it with its snout, normal behavior that tourists paid thousands of dollars to witness. Great white sharks are naturally curious predators that investigate unfamiliar objects in their territory through physical contact, using their snouts and mouths to gather information about potential threats or prey. They have no hands to explore with, so they use their most sensitive organ, their mouth, to investigate. This behavior, while appearing aggressive to humans, is simply how great whites explore their environment and determine whether something poses a threat or opportunity. Their investigative nature has been documented countless times, with most encounters ending peacefully once the shark determines the object is neither food nor threat. Jennifer, initially thrilled by the close encounter, began to feel overwhelmed as the massive predator continued its investigation. The shark's size and proximity were far more intense than anything she had experienced in her previous diving adventures. When the great white made a particularly close pass, bumping the cage more forcefully than before, Jennifer made a critical error in judgment that would change everything. The shark's massive eye, black and emotionless, seemed to stare directly at Jennifer through the cage bars, creating a primal fear response that overrode her training. Her heart rate spiked, and she began hyperventilating through her regulator, a dangerous condition that could lead to panic and poor decision-making underwater. Instead of remaining calm and following the safety protocols that required staying inside the cage at all times, Jennifer panicked and attempted to signal for immediate surface evacuation. In her anxiety, she moved too quickly toward the top of the cage, inadvertently positioning herself near the cage opening just as the great white made another investigative pass. The dive master immediately recognized the dangerous situation and moved to guide Jennifer back to the center of the cage. The shark, responding to Jennifer's sudden movement and her position near the cage opening, made contact with her arm as she reached upward. The bite was investigative rather than predatory, a single, powerful clamp that immediately released released when the shark determined she wasn't prey. However, the damage from even an investigative bite from a 16-foot great white was severe, the serrated teeth leaving deep lacerations that required immediate medical attention. The dive master inside the cage immediately activated emergency protocols, applying direct pressure to Jennifer's wounded arm while signaling for immediate surface evacuation. The great white, having completed its investigation and determining that the cage and its occupants posed no threat or food opportunity, departed the area following typical post-contact behavior. The entire incident lasted less than 30 seconds, but those moments would be etched in Jennifer's memory forever. Surface support crew had Jennifer out of the water within 90 seconds of the incident, their emergency response training proving invaluable in the critical first minutes. The boat's medical officer, specifically trained in shark bite trauma and equipped with advanced first aid supplies, immediately stabilized Jennifer's arm and controlled the bleeding while the captain radioed for emergency medical evacuation. Emergency medical response was immediate and professional. Jennifer was airlifted to Adelaide's trauma center, where surgeons worked to repair the damage to her arm and shoulder. The medical team's quick response and Jennifer's overall good health contributed significantly to her positive outcome. Jennifer survived the encounter, but required multiple reconstructive surgeries and months of physical therapy. She eventually regained most of the function in her arm, though she never returned to diving. Her experience led to enhanced safety protocols for cage diving operations, including mandatory panic management training and improved cage designs that minimized the possibility of tourist shark contact. April 15th, 2014, brought perfect fishing conditions to the waters off Montauk Point, New York. The Atlantic stretched endlessly under clear skies, with gentle swells that promised an excellent day on the water. Captain Valentina Val Kowalski, 45, prepared her charter boat for what would become her final voyage. Valentina was an experienced charter captain with 18 years running fishing trips in these waters. As one of the few female charter captains on the East Coast, she had built a solid reputation and was known for never backing down from challenging conditions. That afternoon, she was running a bluefin tuna charter with 6 clients, all eager to land the fish of a lifetime. The group had been chumming heavily for over 90 minutes in 35 feet of water, creating a concentrated blood slick as they successfully landed several bloody tuna. The strategy was working perfectly. The scent of fresh blood was drawing fish from miles around. At 3:45 p.m., their anchor became tangled in kelp, threatening to cost them their expensive setup. Rather than cut the line and lose hundreds of dollars in equipment, Valentina made the decision to dive down and free the anchor herself. The waters off Montauk Point were known for their rich marine life, but also for their predators. The area's position at the convergence of several ocean currents created a natural feeding ground that attracted everything from small bait fish to massive bluefin tuna. What many recreational fishermen didn't realize was that this same convergence also made it a prime hunting ground for great whites, particularly during the warmer months when seal populations were at their peak. Valentina's clients watched nervously as she prepared her diving gear. Several of them had expressed concern about her entering the water, especially given the amount of blood and fish parts that had been dispersed around their boat. The chum slick extended nearly a quarter mile behind them, creating a visible trail on the surface that could be seen from the air. The decision to dive was not made lightly. Valentina had calculated the risks and believed that her years of experience and the relatively shallow depth would keep her safe. She had made similar dives dozens of times before, always successfully retrieving tangled equipment without incident. Her first mate had offered to make the dive instead, but Valentina insisted that as captain, it was her responsibility to handle the dangerous tasks. What Valentina didn't realize was that great white sharks possess one of the most sophisticated sensory systems in the animal kingdom. They can detect a single drop of blood in 25 gallons of water from over a mile away, and their lateral line system allows them to sense electrical impulses from remarkable distances. The concentrated chum slick had been like ringing a dinner bell for predators in the area, creating an irresistible beacon that could be detected from vast distances. As Valentina descended toward the 30-foot anchor line, working methodically to free the expensive equipment, she was completely unaware that a 16-foot female great white had been following the boat's chum trail for the past hour. The massive predator, weighing over 2,000 pounds, had been drawn by the irresistible scent of fresh tuna blood that had been streaming from their boat. The attack came from below, as they always do. The shark struck with explosive force, her powerful jaws clamping down on Valentina's right thigh. The initial bite severed major arteries instantly, sending clouds of crimson into the water. Valentina's scream cut through the afternoon air as she desperately tried to surface. But the shark wasn't finished. Attracted by the fresh blood, the predator attacked again, this time grabbing her left leg with crushing force. Her first mate immediately threw life rings while frantically radioing for help, and her clients worked desperately to pull her toward the boat. The water around them turned red as Valentina fought for her life. Despite reaching her within 3 minutes, Valentina had lost massive amounts of blood from the devastating leg wounds. The femoral arteries in both legs had been severed, and despite the crew's frantic efforts to apply pressure to the wounds, she was losing blood faster than they could control it. She died from hemorrhagic shock 8 minutes later, her life ebbing away even as the Coast Guard helicopter appeared on the horizon. The attack had occurred during optimal hunting conditions, afternoon feeding time in bloodied water with perfect visibility for a predator that had evolved to kill with surgical precision. The investigation later revealed that the concentrated chum slick had created the perfect storm of circumstances that drew the predator directly to their location. But while the waters off Montauk claimed one life through a moment of poor judgment, thousands of miles away in the crystal-clear waters of South Australia, another ocean professional was about to discover that even routine procedures can turn deadly when equipment fails at the worst possible moment. July 3rd, 2015, brought optimal conditions to the Neptune Islands off South Australia. The Southern Ocean was crystal clear with visibility extending over 100 feet into the depths. Perfect for underwater photography. Dr. Serafina Blackwood, 31, was a professional underwater photographer and marine biologist who had been working at Neptune Islands for 3 weeks on a sanctioned research project documenting great white behavior. Serafina had been diving with great whites for years, always from the safety of protective cages, always following protocol to the letter. Her work was destined for publication, and she had been capturing extraordinary footage of these apex predators in their natural habitat. The Neptune Islands were considered one of the premier locations in the world for great white research. The remote archipelago, located 35 miles south of Port Lincoln, served as a natural aggregation site for great whites hunting the abundant fur seal colonies. The crystal-clear waters and predictable shark behavior made it an ideal location for scientific study, but also one of the most dangerous places on Earth to encounter these predators outside of protective barriers. Serafina's research project was groundbreaking in its scope. She was documenting feeding behaviors, social interactions, and territorial patterns that had never been captured on film before. Her underwater photography skills were legendary in the marine biology community, and her images had already contributed to several major scientific publications. The equipment she used was state-of-the-art, worth more than most people's cars, and absolutely essential to her career. The research station at Neptune Islands operated under strict safety protocols developed over decades of shark research. Every dive was carefully planned, with multiple safety divers, emergency equipment, and constant communication with the surface. That morning, several large great whites had been circling the research area, drawn by the carefully controlled bait that researchers use to attract them for study. The sharks were displaying typical investigative behavior, approaching the cages with curiosity rather than aggression. It was exactly the kind of behavior Serafina needed to document, and she had been getting some of the best footage of her career. At 5:45 a.m., during optimal morning light conditions, Serafina was completing her final shots from inside the protective cage when disaster struck in the form of equipment failure. Her camera's power cable became severely tangled in the cage door's hinge mechanism as she maneuvered for the perfect shot. As she tried to free the cable, it only pulled tighter, preventing the cage door from closing properly. Her safety diver was inside the boat reviewing footage when Serafina made the fateful decision that would cost her life. Rather than signal for help and risk losing the camera system, she decided to quickly surface and untangle the cable herself. It seemed like a simple solution. She was an expert swimmer, the surface was only 15 feet away, and she would be back in the cage within seconds. What Serafina didn't account for was the behavior of the 15-foot male great white that had been circling the cage for several minutes. Great whites are naturally curious creatures, and cage diving operations often heighten their investigative behavior. When they see cage activity, they frequently enter what marine biologists call investigation mode, a heightened state of alertness where they're more likely to approach and test potential items with their mouths. This behavior makes them particularly dangerous to anyone outside the protective barriers. She surfaced 15 yards from the cage boat, struggling with the tangled cable just as the massive predator was approaching to investigate. The shark, already in an investigative state due to the cage activity, immediately identified her as something worth examining more closely. In the predator's mind, anything moving at the surface during feeding time was potential prey that needed to be tested. The attack was swift and devastating. The great white's powerful jaws, capable of exerting over 4,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, clamped down on Serafina's torso in its initial strike. Her safety diver heard her screams echoing across the water and dove in immediately, but the damage was already catastrophic. The shark had grabbed her chest and abdomen, its serrated teeth designed by millions of years of evolution to tear through flesh and bone with surgical precision. The boat crew threw flotation devices and initiated emergency procedures, reaching Serafina within 90 seconds. The expedition's marine medic immediately began first aid, working frantically to control the massive bleeding from her torso. However, she had sustained massive chest and abdominal injuries from the shark's powerful bite, with internal organs damaged beyond repair. Despite their best efforts and immediate medical attention, Serafina died from trauma and blood loss during the helicopter evacuation to Adelaide, 35 minutes after the attack. The investigation revealed that equipment failure had created the perfect storm of circumstances. An experienced professional forced to make a split-second decision that placed her in harm's way at the worst possible moment. While the clear waters of South Australia claimed one life through equipment failure, off the coast of California, a trained rescue swimmer's heroic instincts were about to lead him into an encounter with an even larger predator. September 22, 2016, dawned with unusual clarity off Pacifica, California. The Pacific Ocean sparkled under brilliant sunshine, with offshore winds creating the kind of glassy conditions that made the Northern California coast famous among surfers and fishermen alike. Lieutenant Ezekiel "Zeke" Hawthorne, 29, was enjoying a rare day off from his demanding duties as a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. Ezekiel was an elite Coast Guard rescue swimmer with 7 years of service, credited with saving 23 lives in some of the most dangerous conditions imaginable. He was on personal leave, fishing with 2 close friends 8 miles offshore, enjoying the rare luxury of being on the water without the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The waters off Pacifica were known for their unpredictable conditions and abundant marine life. The area around Mavericks, famous for its massive winter swells, was also notorious for its great white shark population. Local surfers and fishermen had learned to respect these waters, understanding that the same conditions that created world-class waves also attracted some of the ocean's most dangerous predators. Ezekiel's friends had chosen this particular spot because it was far enough offshore to avoid the crowds, but close enough to shore to provide safety if conditions deteriorated. The weather forecast had been perfect, and they had launched early to take advantage of the calm sea. The rescue swimmer training that had made Ezekiel legendary in the Coast Guard was both a blessing and a curse. He had been conditioned to respond instantly to emergencies, to put the lives of others before his own safety, and to never hesitate when someone needed help. These instincts had saved dozens of lives over his career, but they also meant he could never truly turn off his sense of responsibility, even on his days off. His friends knew about his heroic reputation, and often joked that he couldn't help himself when it came to helping others. They had seen him stop to help stranded motorists, assist elderly people with their groceries, and volunteer for every dangerous mission that came up at his Coast Guard station. It was simply who he was, someone who couldn't ignore another person's distress. At 2:15 p.m., their peaceful afternoon was shattered when they spotted a capsized kayaker clinging desperately to his overturned boat about 200 yards away. The man was clearly exhausted, his arms barely able to maintain their grip on the slippery hull. Ezekiel's training kicked in immediately. He could see the victim was in serious trouble and wouldn't last much longer in the cold Pacific water. His friends immediately reached for the radio to call the Coast Guard for official backup, but Ezekiel was already assessing the situation. The kayaker was clearly hypothermic and losing strength rapidly. Without hesitation, Ezekiel dove from their 22-foot boat and began swimming toward the victim, despite his friends' protests to wait for Coast Guard backup. It was exactly the kind of split-second decision that had made him a legend in the Coast Guard. What none of them knew was that the area around Mavericks had experienced increased seal activity due to a massive bait ball that had formed after recent storms. The murky, post-storm waters were perfect hunting conditions for great whites, and several had been spotted in the area over the past few days. Great whites are ambush predators that rely on explosive surprise attacks. They typically hunt from below, using their powerful tails to launch themselves upward at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour. As Ezekiel reached the exhausted kayaker and began towing him back toward the rescue boat, a 17-foot female great white, hunting in the murky waters, detected the electrical signatures of their beating hearts and the vibrations of their movement. To the predator, the splashing and struggling looked exactly like wounded seals, her preferred prey during this time of year. The attack came from directly below, with the explosive force that had made great whites the ocean's most feared predator. The massive shark grabbed Ezekiel's legs, likely mistaking the two men's frantic movement for wounded marine mammals. Even as the predator's jaws clamped down on his lower body, Ezekiel's heroic instincts never wavered. With his last conscious act, he managed to push the kayaker toward the rescue boat before the shark attacked again, this time fatally. His friends reached both men within 4 minutes, successfully saving the kayaker, but finding Ezekiel had sustained massive trauma to his legs and lower torso. The great white's serrated teeth had severed major arteries, and despite immediate first aid and pressure bandages, he was losing blood at an alarming rate. He died from blood loss and shock during the helicopter evacuation, just 15 minutes after the attack. While the murky waters off California claimed a hero's life, in the kelp forests of Northern California, a recreational diver was about to learn that sometimes the ocean's warnings are too subtle to recognize until it's too late. November 8, 2017, brought crisp, clear conditions to the Mendocino coast of Northern California. The Pacific stretched endlessly under overcast skies, with gentle swells rolling in from the northwest, Perfect conditions for what would be the final abalone diving day of the season. Bartholomew Bart Sinclair, 52, stood on the rocky shore, breathing in the salt air and feeling the familiar excitement that came with hunting for the ocean's most prized shellfish. Bartholomew was an experienced recreational abalone diver with 15 years of freediving experience in these waters. His weathered wetsuit and well-worn diving gear told the story of countless successful hunts. For over a decade, he had been making the pilgrimage to these remote coves, freediving to depths of 25 feet in search of the red abalone that had become increasingly rare along the California coast. The Mendocino coast was legendary among abalone divers for its pristine waters and abundant shellfish populations. The area's remoteness meant that it was less heavily harvested than more accessible locations, making it a favorite destination for serious divers willing to make the trek to these isolated coves. Bartholomew had been diving this particular stretch of coast for over a decade, learning its secrets through years of patient exploration. He knew which tides provided the best conditions, which coves offered the largest specimens, and which areas were most likely to be productive during different times of the year. The abalone season was strictly regulated, with specific dates, size limits, and bag limits designed to protect the declining populations. This would be one of the last legal diving days of the year, and Bartholomew had been planning this trip for weeks. His regular diving partner was recovering from surgery, but Bartholomew couldn't resist making one final dive of the season alone. What Bartholomew didn't know was that 2 days earlier, a single dead seal had washed ashore just a quarter mile from his chosen diving spot. Local marine officials had attributed the death to natural causes, filing it away as routine marine mortality without conducting a thorough examination. But the seal hadn't died of natural causes. It had been killed by a great white shark, and its death was a warning sign that went unrecognized by authorities. At 11:30 a.m., Bartholomew entered the crystal-clear water at the remote cove, his float bag trailing behind him as he began his methodical search. The visibility was excellent, extending nearly 30 feet in all directions, and he could see the rocky bottom clearly. The conditions were perfect for what he hoped would be a productive final dive of the season. He made several successful dives to 25 feet, prying red abalone from their rocky homes and placing them carefully in his collection bag. The shellfish were plentiful, and he was having one of his best days in recent memory. Each dive required him to hold his breath for nearly 2 minutes as he worked to remove the abalone without damaging their shells. Great whites are known to patrol the same hunting grounds repeatedly, especially areas where they've had recent success. These apex predators have excellent spatial memory and will return to productive hunting spots day after day, drawn by the scent markers and familiar territory that promise easy prey. When a great white kills in a particular area, it often continues to hunt there for several days, establishing a temporary territory around the kill site. The kelp forests that surrounded the cove provided perfect cover for a hunting great white. The dense underwater vegetation created a maze of shadows and hiding places where a large predator could approach unseen. The same kelp that made the area attractive to abalone also made it an ideal hunting ground for sharks, providing concealment and ambush opportunities. On his 6th dive, while prying a particularly large abalone from the rocks at 25 feet, Bartholomew was completely focused on his task. The shellfish was wedged tightly into a crevice, requiring all his attention and strength to remove without damaging it. He was so concentrated on his work that he didn't notice the massive shadow approaching from the kelp forest behind him. The 16-foot male great white had been feeding in the area since killing the seal 2 days earlier, and was attracted by Bartholomew's splashing and the scent from his catch bag. The combination of movement, electrical impulses from his beating heart, and the smell of disturbed marine life created an irresistible target for the predator. As Bartholomew surfaced for air, his lungs burning from the extended dive, the shark struck with the lightning speed that had made its species the ocean's most efficient predator. His scream echoed across the empty cove as he desperately tried to fight off the massive predator, but he was alone with no one to hear his cries for help. The shark attacked twice more as Bartholomew tried frantically to reach shore, each strike drawing more blood into the water and triggering the predator's feeding response. The remote location that had made this cove perfect for abalone diving now became a death trap. His dive buddy, who was supposed to pick him up later that afternoon, arrived 15 minutes early and heard Bartholomew's desperate cries from the parking area above the cove. By the time he scrambled down the rocky path to the water's edge, Bartholomew had lost consciousness from massive blood loss, floating face down in the crimson-stained water. Despite immediate CPR and a helicopter evacuation, Bartholomew died during transport to Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital, becoming the first abalone diving fatality in that area in over a decade. While the kelp forests of Northern California claimed one life through isolation and bad timing, thousands of miles away in the warm waters of South Africa, a dedicated athlete was about to discover that even popular beaches can harbor deadly surprises during the wrong conditions. June 12, 2018, dawned with spectacular conditions at Muizenberg Beach, South Africa. The Indian Ocean sparkled under a brilliant sunrise, with gentle offshore breezes creating the kind of perfect swimming conditions that had made this stretch of coastline famous among triathletes worldwide. Cordelia Cora Nightingale, 27, stood on the pristine white sand, adjusting her goggles and feeling the familiar pre-training excitement that had driven her athletic pursuits for years. Cordelia was a dedicated amateur triathlete, training for her first Ironman competition. She had traveled from London to Cape Town, specifically to train in these legendary waters, having spent weeks planning this trip and researching ocean conditions, currents, and safety protocols for the famous Muizenberg Beach. Muizenberg Beach was considered one of the premier training destinations for open water swimmers and triathletes. The beach had hosted numerous international competitions and was a regular training ground for Olympic athletes. The beach was already showing signs of early morning activity, a few dedicated surfers checking the waves at nearby Surfers' Corner, and the occasional jogger making their way along the pristine shoreline. Cordelia had deliberately chosen to start her swim at 6:30 a.m., well before the crowds arrived, but also before the shark spotters took their positions at 8 a.m. The decision to swim before the shark spotters were on duty was calculated. Cordelia had read that early morning conditions were often ideal for training, with calmer waters and fewer crowds. The shark spotter program was relatively new, and many experienced swimmers had been training in these waters for years without incident. She felt that her research and preparation had adequately addressed the risks. Her training plan called for a challenging 3-mile swim parallel to the shore, staying within the protected swimming area that was clearly marked by buoys and warning signs. She had studied the currents carefully and knew that staying close to shore would keep her in the safest possible conditions. The water temperature was perfect, and visibility was excellent. Everything seemed ideal for a productive training session. What she hadn't accounted for were the strong offshore currents that had developed overnight, invisible from the surface, but powerful enough to pull even strong swimmers into deeper water. These currents were particularly deceptive because they operated below the surface, gradually drawing swimmers seaward without them realizing what was happening until it was too late. The currents around Muizenberg were influenced by a complex interaction of tides, wind patterns, and underwater topography. While generally predictable, they could change rapidly based on weather conditions and seasonal variations. Local swimmers knew to constantly check their position relative to shore landmarks, but visitors often underestimated how quickly the currents could carry them off course. After 40 minutes of steady swimming, maintaining what she thought was a course parallel to the beach, Cordelia realized something was terribly wrong. Despite her efforts to stay within the designated safe zone, she found herself 600 yards offshore in 30 feet of water, well beyond the protected swimming area. The current had been gradually pulling her seaward, so subtly that she hadn't noticed until she was already in danger. Now she was in exactly the kind of deep water that the safety zones were designed to help swimmers avoid. The water around Muizenberg was part of False Bay, a large bay system that served as a nursery area for various marine species, including young great white sharks. The bay's protected waters and abundant food sources made it an ideal habitat for juvenile sharks learning to hunt. During certain times of the year, the concentration of young great whites in the bay could be quite high. What Cordelia didn't know was that juvenile great whites are actually more dangerous to humans than adults in many ways. While adult great whites typically avoid humans after an initial investigative bite, juveniles are less experienced at distinguishing between different types of prey. They're also more aggressive and persistent, lacking the learned caution that comes with age and experience. Young great whites are still developing their hunting skills and are more likely to make mistakes in prey identification, often attacking multiple times rather than retreating after an initial bite. As she kicked desperately toward shore, fighting against the current that had pulled her into danger, a 14-foot juvenile great white was hunting in the area during the early morning feeding period. The young shark, inexperienced in distinguishing between seals and humans, was attracted by Cordelia's rhythmic kicking and the electrical impulses generated by her rapidly beating heart. To the juvenile predator, her frantic movements looked exactly like a wounded seal struggling at the surface. The attack came without warning, as they always do. The juvenile great white struck Cordelia's legs as she fought to swim back toward the safety of shallow water. Unlike an adult shark that might bite once and retreat upon realizing its mistake, this young predator was particularly aggressive and persistent, attacking multiple times as Cordelia screamed and tried to fight it off. Her cries for help carried across the water to the early morning surfers at nearby Surfers' Corner. Two experienced local surfers immediately recognized the sound of distress and paddled toward her on their boards. The first surfer reached Cordelia within 4 minutes, helping to pull her onto his board while scanning the water for any sign of the shark. But the damage was already beyond repair. The juvenile's repeated attacks had caused massive trauma to both legs, with major arterial damage that was causing her to lose blood at an alarming rate. Despite the surfer's immediate first aid efforts and a rapid rescue to the beach, Cordelia had lost too much blood to survive. She died from hemorrhagic shock just 12 minutes after the attack, even as paramedics arrived on the scene and began advanced life support measures. The beach rescue team worked frantically to save her life, but the blood loss from the multiple shark bites had been too severe to overcome. The tragedy led to immediate changes in safety protocols at Muizenberg Beach, with shark spotters now deployed during peak training hours and enhanced warning systems for swimmers about the dangers of offshore currents. Additional safety measures included improved signage about current conditions and mandatory safety briefings for early morning swimmers. The morning of April 14, 2014 dawned with perfect conditions at southeast Farallon Island, California. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly under a brilliant blue sky, with crystal-clear visibility that marine researchers dream of. The water temperature held steady at 58 degrees Fahrenheit, ideal for the California sea lions that called these rocky outcroppings home. Emma Rodriguez, 24, couldn't have asked for better conditions for her thesis research dive. The UC Santa Barbara graduate student had been awake since 4:30 a.m., her excitement barely contained as she prepared her equipment on the research vessel. Emma was intensely passionate about marine biology, methodical in her research, and fearless when it came to underwater exploration. She had completed her scientific diving certification 18 months earlier and had already logged 89 research dives, mostly in the familiar waters of Monterey Bay. Working under Dr. Patricia Chen's lab, Emma was conducting her third dive at the Farallones, focusing on California sea lion foraging behavior for her master's thesis. The Farallon Islands, located 27 miles west of San Francisco, were known as the Galapagos of California for their incredible biodiversity. What made these waters so rich in marine life also made them incredibly dangerous. The Farallones sit directly in the path of the California current, creating an explosion of marine life that attracts the ocean's most feared predator. Massive colonies of seals and sea lions, over 100,000 individuals during peak season, hauled out on the rocky shores. Great white sharks patrol these waters with evolutionary perfection, honed over 400 million years. These apex predators can grow up to 20 feet in length and weigh over 5,000 pounds. Their torpedo-shaped bodies capable of explosive bursts of speed reaching 25 miles per hour. Their most terrifying feature is their mouth, lined with up to 300 serrated triangular teeth that continuously regenerate throughout their lifetime. At 6:45 a.m., Emma made her fatal mistake. She descended to 25 feet, positioning herself directly above a seal haul-out ledge during peak predation hours, the ring of death that occurs between 6 and 8 a.m. when seals return from overnight foraging trips, exhausted and vulnerable. Wearing her standard black wetsuit and carrying a bright yellow data slate, Emma remained perfectly still 15 feet above the seal colony, methodically counting and photographing the animals. What Emma didn't know was that an 18-foot female great white had been patrolling these waters since dawn. This massive predator, weighing approximately 4,500 pounds, had already made 2 unsuccessful attacks on seals and was in an aggressive hunting state. Female great whites are typically larger than males and more aggressive, especially during feeding periods. Great whites possess extraordinary sensory capabilities that make them perfect killing machines. They can detect a single drop of blood in 25 gallons of water from up to 3 miles away. Emma's silhouette against the surface, combined with her black wetsuit and methodical movements, perfectly mimicked a resting seal. Her yellow data slate, flashing in the sunlight, may have resembled the pale belly of an injured seal. The attack came with devastating precision. The shark approached from the deep channel below, accelerating to its maximum speed of 25 miles per hour in the last 20 feet. The attack was so violent that the shark's momentum carried both predator and prey several feet above the surface in an explosion of white water. The massive jaws, measuring 18 inches across, delivered the initial bite to Emma's torso with the full force of 1,800 psi. The serrated teeth, each up to 2.5 inches long, sliced through her wetsuit, flesh and bone with surgical precision. Her dive partner, working 150 feet away, heard the distinctive surface disturbance and saw the explosive white water that marked a great white attack. The research vessel crew activated emergency protocols immediately, but Emma had sustained catastrophic damage to major organs and arteries. The great white's bite had crushed ribs, punctured lungs, and severed major blood vessels. She was recovered in just 4 minutes, but the massive internal bleeding and shock had already begun shutting down her vital systems. Emma died before the Coast Guard helicopter could reach the mainland. Her promising career in marine science cut tragically short during peak predation hours in the world's most active great white hunting ground. While the crystal-clear waters of California claimed one life in their deadly embrace, hundreds of miles south, another diver would soon discover that changing ocean conditions can bring unexpected predators into familiar waters. September 22, 2015, brought unusual conditions to Bodega Bay, California. Heavy rains from the previous week had created significant runoff, reducing underwater visibility to a dangerous 3 feet and bringing nutrients that attracted massive schools of bait fish. The water temperature had risen to an unusual 64 degrees Fahrenheit due to El Niño conditions. Carlos Mendoza, 38, had seen worse conditions in his 12 years of commercial sea urchin diving, but something felt different about this day. Carlos was the kind of diver other professionals respected, methodical, experienced, and never one to take unnecessary risks. His weathered hands and sun-darkened skin told the story of over 2,000 commercial dives along the Northern California coast. He worked exclusively with his brother as a dive tender, and their operation was known for its safety record. The recent El Niño weather pattern had created unusual conditions throughout the Pacific coast, bringing warmer water temperatures and altered current patterns that disrupted normal marine ecosystems. These conditions had attracted an unexpected visitor to the shallow waters of Bodega Bay, a predator that typically remained in deeper offshore waters. Blue sharks are among the most wide-ranging and aggressive predators in the world's oceans. These sleek, fast-moving sharks typically inhabit open ocean environments, but are known to venture into coastal waters when following prey or unusual current patterns. Growing up to 12 feet in length and weighing up to 400 pounds, blue sharks are built for speed and endurance. What makes blue sharks particularly dangerous is their opportunistic and aggressive nature. Unlike many shark species that are cautious around unfamiliar objects, blue sharks are bold investigators that will attack almost anything that moves. That afternoon, Carlos was completing his final dive of the day, working at 45 feet depth to harvest red sea urchins from the rocky bottom near the Russian River mouth. The recent storms had stirred up the bottom sediment, creating murky conditions that reduced visibility to almost zero. Following strict commercial diving protocols, he began his ascent at 1:30 p.m., stopping at 15 feet for his mandatory 3-minute safety stop. The 10-foot blue shark had been patrolling these waters for several days, following the unusual warm water intrusion that had brought it far from its normal open ocean habitat. The murky conditions didn't hinder this predator, which relied heavily on its other senses to locate prey. The shark had been feeding on the abundant bait fish in the area, but the presence of a large moving object in its territory triggered its investigative response. As Carlos reached for his surface marker buoy during his safety stop, the movement attracted the blue shark's attention through the murky water. The shark's lateral line system detected the water displacement, while its ampullae of Lorenzini sensed the electrical field generated by his beating heart. Carlos caught a glimpse of movement in his peripheral vision, but couldn't identify the source in the murky conditions. The attack came suddenly and with devastating force. The blue shark grabbed Carlos's right leg just above the knee, its powerful jaws clamping down with 1,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. The sharp, triangular teeth sliced through his wetsuit and deep into muscle and bone. Blue sharks are known for their tenacious grip and thrashing behavior, designed to subdue large prey in the open ocean. Carlos immediately activated his emergency whistle and fought back with his urchin rake, striking at the shark's head and snout. But blue sharks are persistent attackers that rarely retreat once they commit to an assault. The thrashing continued for nearly 90 seconds as the shark attempted to subdue its prey. The shark's serrated teeth sawed through Carlos's femoral artery, sending clouds of blood into the murky water. The scent of blood triggered an even more aggressive response from the blue shark, which began to roll and twist in an attempt to tear away larger pieces of flesh. Carlos managed to drive his dive knife deep into the shark's gill area, finally forcing it to release its grip and retreat into the murky water. His brother heard the emergency whistle from the boat 100 yards away and immediately raced toward Carlos's dive flag, covering the distance in 90 seconds. Despite his brother's desperate efforts to control the bleeding and race toward shore at maximum speed, Carlos died from hemorrhagic shock during the 8-minute boat ride to the harbor. While the murky waters of Bodega Bay concealed a predator displaced by unusual conditions, 40 miles south of San Diego, a Coast Guard rescue swimmer was about to face a different kind of nightmare, one where mechanical failure would leave him stranded in open ocean. June 8, 2016, dawned with moderate swells and clear skies 40 miles southwest of San Diego, California. The Pacific stretched endlessly in all directions, its deep blue surface broken only by occasional whitecaps. The water temperature held steady at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. For Petty Officer Second Class Marcus Thompson, 28, it was shaping up to be a routine rescue operation, the kind he had successfully completed 127 times during his 6 years of Coast Guard service. Marcus embodied everything the Coast Guard looked for in a rescue swimmer. At 6 feet 2 inches with the lean, powerful build of a competitive swimmer, he had earned a reputation as one of the most capable rescue swimmers in his unit. He had pulled survivors from sinking vessels, plucked injured fishermen from storm-tossed boats, and once spent 45 minutes in 12-foot seas, rescuing a family whose yacht had capsized. The waters 40 miles offshore represented a completely different ecosystem from coastal areas. This was the domain of pelagic species, creatures adapted to life in the open ocean, where the nearest land might be hundreds of miles away. Here, apex predators ruled with absolute authority over vast territories of blue water. At 2:15 p.m., Marcus was lowered from an HH-60 Jayhawk helicopter to assist 3 fishermen whose vessel was taking on water rapidly. The fishing boat had been chumming for yellowfin tuna earlier in the day, creating a slick of blood and fish parts that extended for nearly a mile. As Marcus reached the water, in his bright orange survival suit, disaster struck. The helicopter's hoist mechanism failed catastrophically, stranding him in the open ocean, while the aircraft was forced to return to base for emergency repairs. What Marcus didn't know was that the chum slick had attracted several oceanic white-tip sharks to the area. These open ocean predators are considered by many marine biologists to be the most dangerous sharks in the world when it comes to open water encounters. Unlike coastal species that have abundant food sources, oceanic white-tips patrol vast areas of nutrient-poor open ocean, making them incredibly opportunistic and aggressive when they encounter potential prey. Oceanic white-tip sharks are perfectly adapted for life in the open ocean. They typically grow to 10 to 11 feet in length and can weigh up to 170 pounds, with a distinctive stocky build and rounded fins tipped with white markings that give them their name. What makes oceanic white-tips particularly terrifying is their feeding behavior. Unlike coastal sharks that might investigate and retreat, oceanic white-tips are persistent attackers that will continue their assault until their prey is completely consumed. They are known to follow ships for days, waiting for any opportunity to feed. During World War II, they were responsible for more human fatalities than any other shark species. A 10-foot male had been following the chum slick for hours, drawn by the scent of blood and fish oils. When Marcus entered the water, the shark immediately detected his presence through multiple sensory channels. Marcus treaded water in his survival suit, following his training to remain calm and avoid sudden movements. But in the open ocean, there was nowhere to hide. He was completely exposed in thousands of feet of blue water, his bright orange suit making him highly visible to any predator in the area. The shark approached Marcus with the bold confidence typical of its species. Unlike coastal sharks that might circle warily, the oceanic white-tip came directly toward him. Its large pectoral fins spread wide as it glided through the water with predatory grace. Marcus could see the distinctive white-tipped fins cutting through the surface as the massive predator closed the distance. For 20 agonizing minutes, the shark circled Marcus, making increasingly close passes while he tried to remain calm. Each pass brought the predator closer, its small, dark eyes fixed on him with unmistakable intent. When Marcus attempted to deploy his emergency shark repellent device, the cartridge malfunctioned, leaving him completely defenseless. The shark's investigation phase ended abruptly when it detected Marcus's increasing stress levels through his elevated heart rate and rapid breathing. The oceanic white-tip struck with bold aggression, grabbing Marcus's leg with devastating force. Its powerful jaws clamped down with approximately 1,000 psi of pressure, the serrated teeth slicing through his survival suit and deep into muscle and bone. Marcus used his rescue knife to defend himself, striking at the shark's snout and gills in a desperate attempt to force it to release its grip. The attack lasted for nearly 2 minutes. The shark's persistence was characteristic of oceanic whitetips, which rarely retreat once they commit to an attack. Marcus's blood in the water only increased the predator's aggression. The backup helicopter arrived 25 minutes later to find Marcus unconscious and bleeding heavily. The water around him stained red with his blood. The shark had finally released its grip when the helicopter's rotor wash disturbed the water surface, but the damage was catastrophic. Despite immediate medical attention during the flight to shore, Marcus died from massive blood loss and shock before reaching the hospital. His death led to mandatory backup shark deterrent systems for all Coast Guard rescue swimmers. While the open ocean claimed a hero's life in broad daylight, in the warm, clear waters of the Florida Keys, a world-class freediver was about to discover that even the most experienced ocean athletes can fall victim to the sea's most opportunistic and unpredictable predators. August 17, 2017, brought perfect conditions to the waters 25 miles off Marathon in the Florida Keys. The Gulf Stream current ran clear and blue, with visibility extending over 100 feet into the crystal-clear depths. The water temperature held steady at a comfortable 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Alexandra Alex Petrov, 31, had been looking forward to this deep training session for weeks. Alex was a legend in the freediving community, a world-ranked athlete who could dive to depths exceeding 200 feet on a single breath. Her lean, athletic build and intense focus had earned her multiple national records and the respect of freedivers worldwide. She had been teaching freediving for 8 years, running a successful school in Key Largo, where she trained hundreds of students. The waters off the Florida Keys represented some of the most challenging and rewarding freediving locations in the world. The proximity to the Gulf Stream brought clear, warm water and an abundance of pelagic species, but it also attracted some of the ocean's most dangerous predators. At 4:20 p.m., Alex was demonstrating deep, constant weight technique for an advanced student, preparing to descend to 180 feet. During her extended bottom time at 180 feet, Alex experienced shallow water blackout during her ascent, a condition where decreased oxygen levels cause unconsciousness as a freediver approaches the surface. When she finally broke the surface, gasping for air after the deep dive, she found herself 400 yards from her safety boat in unfamiliar water. What Alex didn't know was that she had surfaced directly in a feeding zone where a dead pilot whale calf had been floating for 2 days. The decomposing carcass had created a massive scent trail that attracted scavengers from miles around, including some of the ocean's most dangerous predators. Tiger sharks are among the most dangerous predators in tropical and subtropical waters worldwide. These massive sharks can grow up to 18 feet in length and weigh over 1,400 pounds, making them one of the largest predatory sharks in the ocean. Their distinctive dark stripes, which give them their name, fade as they mature, but their reputation as indiscriminate killers only grows stronger with age. What makes tiger sharks particularly terrifying is their feeding behavior. They are often called the waste baskets of the sea because they will eat virtually anything they encounter. Their stomachs have been found to contain everything from sea turtles and seals to license plates, tires, and even human remains. This indiscriminate feeding behavior, combined with their massive size and powerful jaws, makes them extremely dangerous to humans. Tiger sharks possess incredibly powerful jaws, capable of delivering up to 1,050 pounds per square inch of crushing force. Their teeth are uniquely designed with a curved, serrated edge that can cut through the shells of sea turtles, the tough skin of other sharks, and even metal objects. A 14-foot female tiger shark had been feeding aggressively on the whale carcass and was in a heightened predatory state. The massive predator, weighing approximately 1,200 pounds, had been gorging herself on the rich blubber and meat of the dead whale. When feeding on large carcasses, tiger sharks often become more aggressive and territorial, defending their food source against any perceived threats. Alex's rapid breathing and surface splashing after the deep dive attracted the shark's attention immediately. To the predator, the surface disturbance looked like a wounded or distressed animal, exactly the type of easy prey that tiger sharks are programmed to attack. The shark's lateral line system detected the water movements caused by Alex's breathing and arm movements, while her elevated heart rate after the deep dive created electrical signals that the shark could detect from a considerable distance. The massive predator approached from below, using the sun's glare on the surface to mask its approach until the final moment. Alex, still recovering from her deep dive and disoriented from the shallow water blackout, never saw the attack coming. The shark approached from below and grabbed Alex's torso in a single, devastating bite that showcased the full power of one of the ocean's most formidable predators. Massive jaws, capable of opening to a gape of nearly 2 feet, engulfed her midsection with crushing force. The serrated teeth sliced through her wetsuit and deep into her torso, crushing ribs and puncturing vital organs. The attack lasted approximately 30 seconds, but the damage was catastrophic. Tiger sharks are known for their powerful bite and thrashing behavior, using their muscular necks to cause maximum trauma to their prey. The shark's grip crushed Alex's ribcage and caused massive internal bleeding before it released her and disappeared into the depths. Her safety diver, searching frantically from the boat after losing sight of Alex during her ascent, heard her brief scream and located her within 3 minutes, but the damage had already been done. The shark's powerful jaws had crushed Alex's ribcage and punctured her lungs, liver, and other vital organs. Massive internal bleeding had already begun, and her body was going into shock from the trauma. Alex was pulled from the water and given immediate medical attention, but the damage was too severe. She died from massive internal trauma and blood loss before reaching shore. Her world-class athletic career ended by one of the ocean's most unpredictable predators. Investigation revealed that the whale carcass had created a feeding aggregation of multiple tiger sharks in the area, critical information that hadn't been communicated to local dive operators. The incident led to new protocols requiring marine wildlife surveys before deep diving operations. While the warm waters of the Florida Keys claimed a freediving champion off the coast of Mexico, an award-winning filmmaker was about to learn that artificial lights can transform even the most controlled shark encounter into a deadly nightmare. October 3, 2018 brought crystal clear conditions to the waters surrounding Isla Guadalupe, Mexico. The remote island, located 150 miles off the Baja California coast, offered some of the clearest water and most predictable great white shark encounters on the planet. Visibility extended over 150 feet in the deep blue water, and the water temperature held steady at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. David Chen, 33, had been looking forward to this night shoot for months, knowing that documenting nocturnal great white behavior could revolutionize understanding of these apex predators. David was an award-winning underwater cinematographer whose work had appeared in National Geographic documentaries and major motion pictures. His passion for shark behavior had led him to specialize in great white footage, and he had spent 5 years filming at Guadalupe Island without incident. He had thousands of hours of great white footage and worked exclusively with the most established and safety-conscious operators in the business. Isla Guadalupe had become the premier destination for great white shark encounters due to its unique geography and marine ecosystem. This topography, combined with abundant seal colonies and nutrient-rich currents, creates perfect conditions for great white sharks. Waters around Guadalupe host one of the largest concentrations of great whites in the world. The great white sharks of Guadalupe are among the largest and most impressive specimens of their species. At 8:30 p.m., David was filming from a specially designed night cage, part of a National Geographic project documenting nocturnal great white behavior that had never been captured on film before. The cage was constructed of reinforced aluminum bars with emergency release mechanisms designed to prevent entrapment if the structure became damaged. David was using cutting-edge equipment, including a new high-intensity LED array that produced 12,000 lumens, significantly brighter than any underwater lighting system previously used for shark filming. Great white sharks are primarily visual hunters that rely heavily on their eyesight to locate and attack prey. What David didn't anticipate was how the intense artificial lighting would affect a massive 17-foot male great white that had been hunting in the area. Great whites have evolved to hunt in specific light conditions, and the powerful LED array began to disorient and agitate the already territorial predator. The artificial lighting disrupted the shark's natural hunting behavior, creating confusion and stress that manifested as increasingly aggressive behavior. The 17-foot male great white, weighing approximately 3,800 pounds, had been patrolling the waters around Guadalupe for several days. This was a mature, experienced predator that had successfully hunted in these waters for years. Male great whites of this size are incredibly territorial and aggressive, especially when their normal behavior patterns are disrupted. Great white sharks possess a complex nervous system that processes visual information with remarkable efficiency. Their brains are specifically adapted to interpret the subtle light patterns and shadows that indicate the presence of prey. When exposed to artificial lighting of extreme intensity, their visual processing system can become overwhelmed, leading to disorientation and aggressive behavior. The shark started exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior, repeatedly ramming the cage with tremendous force. Each impact sent shockwaves through the water and caused the entire cage structure to shake violently. The aluminum bars, designed to withstand the force of a great white attack, began to show stress fractures under the repeated impacts. David continued filming, believing that the cage would protect him from the agitated predator. Great white sharks can generate incredible force when attacking. Their torpedo-shaped bodies, powered by massive tail muscles, can accelerate from 0 to 25 miles per hour in seconds. Shark's behavior became increasingly frenzied as the bright lights continued to disorient its visual system. What should have been a controlled observation session was rapidly deteriorating into a dangerous confrontation between human technology and one of nature's most perfect predators. When David tried to adjust his lighting setup to reduce the shark's agitation, he accidentally triggered the cage's emergency release mechanism, a safety feature designed to prevent entrapment if the cage became damaged during an attack. The top section of the cage opened, creating a 3-foot gap that the massive shark immediately exploited. Great whites are incredibly intelligent predators with excellent spatial awareness. The shark recognized the opening instantly and adjusted its attack pattern to take advantage of the breach in David's defenses. The agitated great white, drawn by the intense lights and David's movements, attacked through the opening with explosive force. This 17-foot individual was already in an excited, aggressive state, and its attack carried the full force of millions of years of evolutionary refinement. The shark's massive jaws, measuring over 18 inches across, clamped down on David's torso with devastating force. The 300 triangular, serrated teeth sliced through his diving equipment and deep into his chest and shoulders. The bite force of 1,800 psi crushed ribs and punctured vital organs, while the shark's brief thrashing motion caused additional trauma as it attempted to drag its prey from the compromised cage. The attack lasted only seconds, but the damage was catastrophic. David's underwater camera continued recording throughout the encounter, capturing footage that would later be used to analyze the incident and improve safety protocols. The images showed the incredible power and speed of a great white attack, as well as the devastating effectiveness of their primary weapon. The boat crew immediately cut all lights and activated emergency protocols, and the sudden darkness seemed to calm the shark, which released its grip and disappeared into the depths as quickly as it had appeared. But the damage was done. David had sustained catastrophic injuries to his cardiovascular and respiratory systems. He was recovered within 90 seconds, a remarkably fast response time that demonstrated the professionalism of the dive crew. But the great white's attack had severed major arteries and crushed vital organs. Despite immediate first aid and emergency medical procedures, David was bleeding internally at a rate that made survival impossible. David died from blood loss and shock before the support vessel could reach the mainland, his final moments captured on the very cameras he had used to document the ocean's apex predators. The footage he had been recording became evidence in the investigation that followed, providing unprecedented insight into great white behavior under artificial lighting conditions. This tragic incident led to new protocols limiting light intensity for all-night filming operations with great whites and requiring backup safety systems for cage diving operations. The investigation revealed that high-intensity artificial lighting could trigger aggressive behavior in great whites, transforming controlled observation sessions into deadly encounters. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.